Welcome to Plat Chat VALORANT episode 70. It's a very special episode of Plat Chat VALORANT because it's episode 70, and we also have a lot of special guests joining us here
we missed
today.
episode 69.
Well, you missed it.
No.
Wait, did we skip it?
No, we didn't skip it. We just didn't really make a big, show and dance about it. I also can't see your faces anymore. I can't see any of your faces, but I'm going to keep talking anyway. I'm going to use mental imagery. Okay, we fixed it. Never mind. I don't have to use mental imagery. Balla, you got back from Germany. How was your trip?
It was not bad, actually. I didn't sleep the night before, and then I got upgraded to business class.
Oh,
so fucking American Airlines,
money.
the best airlines ever.
No,
American
that's
Airlines.
Yeah, I was chilling, bro. It was nice. I'm still a little jet lagged, but we're fine.
We got some travel horror stories as well. Connor, you already went over your baggage loss story.
I did.
Like on the coast stream. Nobody wants to hear that anymore.
They've already heard this.
Yeah, but Mimi had issues with travel as well, no?
American Airlines just sucks, dude. They're just not good in any way, shape, or form. Every time I fly with them, there's a delay. Last time I had to fly from my home airport, they literally had us sitting on the plane for 3 hours. And then I landed in Seattle, and I had to come home from Seattle, and we sat in the plane for literally 4 hours. We were just sitting in the plane longer than the flight. No, this is poetry, Connor.
Stop
We need a snap.
I'm standing. I can't. I have
literally
standing ovation to
like
everything
the
that she's
worst
saying right now.
airline I think I've ever heard.
No, it is not.
I'd rather fly Spirit. But I have too many AA Vantage miles to switch. I'm locked in.
Oh my god.
And I'm also in Philly, so it's the only airline I can fly.
Sponsor us, American Airlines. Then I'll like your airline.
Yeah, we're never getting American Airlines sponsor. I flew my family out to the US for the holidays because I didn't want to go back to the UK because it's just complicated to go back and get back into the US. And I booked their flight through American. The way here was like British Airways, but the way back they're flying on American. And we're going to see if they have the same problems, I guess. It would put a cap on the stressful family Christmas movie that my life is right now, which is it's chaos.
Are you like the depressed businessman from the Hallmark movies that just fucking hates his life over the holiday season? Is that you right now?
No, I mean,
I don't think I am, but I definitely did fly my family out here, and I can't really be around them for longer than 5 hours at a time. Not in a horrible way, but I spent 4 hours playing one Catan game last night. 4 straight hours, and every turn, I had to explain the rules every single time we got around. I had to explain the rules. I was basically playing a single-player Catan game by myself. Because, anyway, I'm not going to get into it. That's my family life.
I think you're overly critical. I think they're
Well, you met my family, Connor. Actually, my grandmother did say she did enjoy, she actually did like you quite a lot.
That's good. This is good. This is good.
You know,
very
Connor's
charismatic.
good with the ladies.
I can't. Now finally, when I backpack through the UK, perhaps I could stay at your family's home while I'm backpacking through. Now that I have the clout.
Yeah, I think that'll be fine. I think that'll be absolutely fine. Yeah, you were popping off at the family barbecue, just asking them all sorts of questions. Anyway, this is a really long episode, so I'm going to get started with the topics that we've got, which is VALORANT Champions has just happened. But before we get into Champions, we've got some of the smaller little patch things that were introduced into the game as well while we were doing the code stream and everything else, starting with patch 3.12, 3.12, adding the agent profiles, which I think was the biggest change and pretty much the only notable change in this patch as well. Long overdue, but finally it is here. And this is kind of, I mean, it was necessary, I think, as well, because if you play a lot of roles, especially Jett, you don't want your dash on E.
They made Killjoy wide this patch. That's all I care about.
They did make Killjoy wide, yeah.
That's all I really care about.
This is like the thing that I've wanted forever, but I have no idea of what I actually would want to use it for, and probably will never use it. I think obviously the biggest one is going to be for agents to have activatable things like cipher cages or nano swarms and stuff. You can take it off of E or whatever your buttons are because they always overlap.
Because you could change like Astra Smoke Pill off F. I think that's the one I would change because it being on F blows. Because if you're going up like a rope on split, you have your star B main and you're in sewers, it'll come back every time. It's awful.
Yeah.
And if you play Raze and Jett, if you're one of the players, it's like a Raze and Jett main. You can have both on like your mouse 4 button instead of having to switch between Q and E. I don't know. It's just quality of life. Probably should have been in the game already, but I'm glad it's here.
Next up is demos.
Yeah, please God.
Demo soon.
Please God.
Demos.
Actually, genuinely, I don't know how many more quality of life things. Obviously, there's going to be like a big ass list, but there's nothing so pressing that I'm not like, oh, we need this before.
Demos.
before demos.
Yeah, demos and replays.
Every time I make a big point, I'm gonna grab my mic like this and just get right in the face of the camera. Riot Games, give me demos.
You've heard it here, Riot, from our local stand-up. Thank you very much.
Quaking. John Riot quaking. The other big part of news, which isn't actually in the game yet, but they actually did post a developer blog post about Yoru getting a rework, which I think is the first time we've seen an agent actually get reworked in this kind of fashion, right? I mean, there was leaks and teases that Omen might be getting something similar with a lot of changes, but there was nothing concrete. But this is actually developer posted. There's a full changes to his kit to make it way better to play and no longer an insta throw if somebody locks Yoru.
All right, I'm gonna say something. I'm gonna say something a little controversial. I think new Yoru plus Breach will be kind of sick on certain maps. I think it'll be kind of sick because he has a teleport now that makes less noise, moves faster, and is harder to see. And he also like teleports. I think he can even like whip out his gun faster out of the TP, which I think is kind of cool. So I think it adds more opportunities for a little bit of tomfoolery, especially when paired with either another flash agent with himself. I don't think he will be meta, but I think he will be similar to some of the agents we've seen coming up more. Like some teams are playing Omen, some teams are playing Breach. It's not the hard set meta, but it can work for the right team. And I think certain players, it can work out. Like I wouldn't hate to see like a Nats try Yoru. That'd be kind of cool, kind of crazy.
That would be something. By some teams playing Omen, are you referring to the teams like in the tier 2? Because I was about to say, because we saw Borkum and Bone Cold play Omen in Champions.
The videos here that they've got as well of the thing. So I think with the audio cue, well, you can't tell because we've got it muted, but you can fake the detonation of the gate crash. So normally you just, if you put down TP, you TP, but now it adds a bit of outplay potential. So you see the TP running past you, and they don't have to take it. They can just, break essentially crosshair placement is I think what they're going for with it by activating it. And I think this is a really cool change. They also increased the speed of it, like you said, Mimi, and as well, I think maybe the equip time. One of the more interesting parts of the kit that they're changing is the footsteps, the fake out, which is up top. I don't know if there's an example of it, but the way it's going to work is they're now going to create a copy of Yoru who is running forwards, and upon getting shot will wind up and explode, debuffing enemies. I don't know what the hell that means. I don't know if that's a vulnerability or what, but that's kind of crazy because the only thing I'm thinking of is TikTok when I see this. I'm thinking of the TikTok plays. I'm thinking of people who are just going to walk in a straight line holding W on Yoru and try and pretend that they are the fake out. And then they're just going to like get into the back line. They're going to run it into the wall and then they're going to whip around and get an ace. But
I don't know. I doubt it. I feel like it's going to work like if you've played Apex Legends, like Mirage, or if you've played Rainbow Six Siege, like whatever that woman's name is. I don't know. She has the same thing. Like every game eventually is like, oh shit, we can add a hologram. That's so fucking cool. And then it sucks. It sucks every time. Like I don't have faith that this will be a good ability. In Pugs, sure, it'll be cool. It'll be sick. I'm excited for the TikTok, like you said. But I think in like legitimate competitive play, this is not worth getting rid of a Jett or getting rid of a Raze or like what role are you switching out to put a player onto this agent? I mean, maybe if you're trying to be like a lurky Yoru rat, you switch off Ascend. It's just like, I don't see where he's going to fit into the meta. I think some teams will try him as a niche pick, and I think that'll be it still.
Yeah, that was my problem too. It's like they just added Chamber, right? And Chamber's abilities
he has similar roles, and he's just better.
I don't want to say that they're similar role because I don't think I agree with that. But I just think
I meant less so role and more like in terms of like the positioning and in terms of like that kind of like additive like teleport ability and having some of that getting out of jail free ability that Yoru I think wants to have. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's like more aggressive with Yoru, and that's just like not that useful because I mean, that's not where you want to be in terms of spacing, right? You want to actually be close to your teammates and stuff like that. So I don't know. Although this takeoff thing kind of seems, without seeing it, I don't know. But to me, it's like a free entry person, right? Like if you can't easily tell the difference, you have to shoot it, right? And if you're starting an execute, you basically have a free, like, let me check this angle real quick thing. You know, I think that could be really fucking good.
There's some interesting plays where if you're like doing like a classic exec and you're just flashing in and someone's holding close and they're like half blinded or something, or they're turning flashes, they might just feel pressured enough to shoot. because like, oh shit, the exec's happening. Like I see the Yoru running me, but I feel like to me, I would like if this ability was almost more of a boom bot, where like you could, because it already has that interaction of like an alarm bot where like when you interact with it and you shoot it, it's gonna, I'm assuming, give vulnerability or something like that. So I think it'd be kind of cool if it would be able to be interactable and actually clear angles, because then you get some extra utility out of it. Now it's like, well, maybe you can get use out of it when we're like, we talk about Balla, like when they're execing and someone's worried that it's the real Yoru pushing. But you know, when you're just taking map control early on in mid round and stuff like that, I have a hard time believing it's going to be incredibly valuable. I could see some like, is it going to interact with like Killjoy turret? Because like, what if you like counter the Killjoy and just fake out the turret every time?
Yeah, but it already does that. It already does that with like against the alarm bots and stuff. And
yeah,
I think it'll like work for like a week. Like someone's gonna play this in like an NSG weekly, and everyone's gonna be like, "Oh my god, it's competitively viable!" And then teams will watch one VOD of it and be like, "Okay, whatever, this isn't gonna work."
Yes, that's the thing. It's Yoru has always been two in the fucking head, yo. You're just like. Like without having these mind games, the character is useless. And if you just ignore the mind games, then the character is useless.
I know what you mean. Not enough concrete value coming from his kit, where like you might want to play arrays on a certain map, and you're definitely not going to want to replace it yet. So it's about what role he's going to be fulfilling, and how it goes. I don't know.
They didn't say that this is like everything too.
Exactly.
I mean,
that's what I was going to say. They've left it quite. Not vague, they've given us a lot of information, but there are still a ton of things that they could tweak to make Yoru better. His flashes, I think, are kind of bad as well. Like, that's one of the things they could change. One of the things that brought KO into a lot more usage was making his flashes really sick. And yeah, there's a ton of different things you can change regarding him. And it seems like it's still a work in progress. But the one takeaway that I've got from this that I was stoked about is that they are willing to make these wholesale changes to a kit almost, or like really rethink how agents work if they're not really, you know, in the meta, or if they're really undervalued in terms of, you know, what their win rates are. Because I think that bodes well on top of that, because I think my hopes are that they look at some ultimates, and instead of changing and tweaking the numbers of it, they look to try and change like an ultimate for an agent. For example, Raze. I think her Raze ult is so inconsistent and weird, and at the highest level, people's movement is so good that it's hard to get value out of it, and so they've increased the cost of it. But I reckon at low ranks, it's probably just an incredible ultimate, because it probably just gets a kill almost every single time. And so they make these changes for the whole of the experience, where I would prefer them to make chops and changes to abilities where you increase like the skill ceiling, I guess, of an ability, and you don't have to change like the ult orb value of it just to balance it. You actually change the ability. Which,
that's definitely promising, but I don't care that much about yours, so I don't care that much about this. And it's weirdly timed to me. I mean, obviously they've been hinting at it forever. Yeah, I just
you're gonna be pissed when Yoru dominates the meta. You're gonna be pissed.
I kind of care, but I don't play Yoru. I mean, does Sean even play Yoru anymore?
No, he doesn't. He has a Twitter banner of Yoru, and that's it.
Yeah, and he's a
John
fake
Yoru doesn't
fan.
even play the agent. How the fuck
I feel like Sean,
he's
he's sort of like a troll, like back in, you know, Bren, back in the Overwatch day, where all the one-trick players, when the hero was really bad, as soon as it got like buffed and reworked, they'd be like, okay, I can't play this anymore. It's too useful.
It's too
and that's
useful.
Gonna be Sean with Yoru. As soon as Yoru
up.
is like good, or at least more useful, he's gonna drop it. Be like, okay, I can't troll with this character anymore.
Well, he's already dropped it, I think, because Sean likes to win. So
he's already preempted.
He doesn't play it.
It's not viable in high level rankings.
When we were stuck in quarantine. So
yeah.
I bring this up every time there's agent changes and stuff like that to bring balance to the agent pool, but I genuinely think there's such a big struggle from Riot's end, where unless you make the fucking agent overpowered as hell, you are going to see teams, anybody pick it up, because it just takes so much work. Even if Yoru was like good, which he's not right now, if he was good right now, nobody's going to pick him up still, just because it takes so much effort for people to realize that they're good.
Yeah, no, for sure. I completely agree with that. We've seen countless times, I've actually seen it in games where they will, when you release a new character in a game, typically the approach is make sure it's overpowered as fuck, and then you bring it down with the levels. Because otherwise, if it's undertuned, no one plays it, and then it becomes way harder to get feedback on whether or not it's actually good as you're progressively buffing it. Anyway, enough about the Yoru, because we've got to get into the meat of this entire episode, which is talking about champs and the entirety of it. Starting with the finals here, Acend win versus Gambit, the closest finals we've had, I think, in Valorant in terms of like where the stakes are the highest, because it's champs, it's the ultimate one. I'm so used to grand finals that are disappointing, and this one actually delivered. It was sick. Champs was everything I could hope for out of the entirety of the event. But yeah, I mean, the finals was so dope to see the back and forth and all the stories like culminating as well all the way to the very end. Very happy for Acend as well, finally getting the, you know, seeing the success that they've had as a team. I know a lot of people wanted Gambit to win because of the storyline, and you have the narrative of the kind of dynasty of that team coming off the back of Berlin. But just with watching the interviews and interviewing some of the players on Acend, these guys are so friendly and they have such a good attitude to the development of their game and as a team that I'm just very happy for them, you know?
Yeah, they just broke every fucking narrative that people had coming into this tournament. They're just like, no, that just wasn't. Well, it might have been true, but we don't care anymore, you know, type of thing. It was nice to see, and you're right. Those guys are really, really good. I think though that like they still had some of the issues that I was talking about, where it's like it feels like there's no clear game plan, but they're overtaking all of that in a very Sentinels-esque manner, where it's like it doesn't really matter what's on the back end of what's happening. We're very good at not only just the fundamentals, but also adapting in order to counter whatever other teams are doing. Which
Their
is
split
nice.
game is what I think of when I think of that, when you say that. Like how they play on split with the comp that just looks like it gets zero value, the absolute alpha comp that they pull out, and yet they still find value with it.
Yeah, it's really cool because I think that for Acend, right, they changed so much from what we expect out of compositions, what we expect out of just teams finding success, and they've usurped that, right? Like they're trying out all these different things. They're experimenting with the breach. They're experimenting with the KO. They're pulling out every different Sentinel. Like it's clear that this team is constantly trying to innovate and constantly trying to change, and I love that because I think a lot of teams that once they get closer and closer to that cusp, it feels like they stagnate and they're like, okay, we have what we think is the optimal comp for this. We need to just keep like banging our head against the wall until it eventually works on out. But it wasn't the case for Acend. And I think that's why they caught a lot of teams off guard for Gambit, especially. I think bringing up the point around their split comp is a big one because they brought really new things into this event and they found a lot of success out of that. And I think I want to give a lot of the credit for that over to Bolden Cold, because he was the guy who was picking up a lot of these weird roles. He was playing the breach, he was playing the Omen, he was playing the Sova when he needed to, and it was working, and he's calling for the team. Like there's a lot of pressure on that guy as an individual, and I feel like even if he wasn't the top performer, he was performing this event in a big way for this squad.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that's my favorite narrative coming from this, was Bone Cold having a horrible tournament at Berlin, and you know, he was largely playing the Astra, and you could tell that as their IGL, he was a little bit uncomfortable, I think, at Berlin, and it ended up obviously just being a huge detriment to the team. But them swapping the roles around and him picking it up and actually talking to him and hearing his mentality and how instead of focusing on trying to macro play, he's focusing on his own gameplay a lot more. And it just came to fruition at the event. Everything came together. Bonecourt had such a better tournament compared to Berlin. Yeah, I love that narrative from Acend.
I think there was 2 redemptions there too, because not just Bone Cold, but also Starzo.
Yes,
Starzo from online Starzo previously. And I remember, you know, going to this event, I was like, I still believe. And he did. The role swap was huge. I mean, I think him going to Smokes and playing Viper and Astra for this team and then the Sage, I mean, he just absolutely gigapounded at points.
The crazy thing about Starzo is he got insane value over the course of this tournament while playing a role that traditionally gets a lot less impact. He swapped over the roles when he's playing the Astra a lot more, and obviously he's still playing the Sage, which can get a ton of impact. But in general, like when you take him off of the Sky and things like that, you would expect the numbers to go down, but he performed at LAN, which was another thing that we were wondering about.
Yeah, I think a lot of the story around this team coming in was obviously CNET and friends, right? That's kind of what it was at Berlin when they underperformed. It was like, well, CNET had a good game, and you know, Fish looking around for any other of his teammates to perform, but it wasn't the case whatsoever at this event. CNET was performing, but besides Bone Cold as a leader, the biggest step up for me was Zeek, right? Wasn't he like?
Oh, yeah.
He was just performing out of his mind. Again, it's a player who's variable on the roles. He's playing it on that raise, which I think is when he looks best. He's not a bad Reyna by any regard, but when they're playing the binds, playing the splits, and he gets that raise, and he's working together with Bone Cold, getting aggressive, taking that space. Again, it's a player with a lot of responsibility that is, in a way, kind of overperforming from what we've previously seen. But the way that he kept it up across the ground finals, across their group play, it kind of shows me that I don't think this is going to fall off. I don't think this is a one-off for him. He needed a little time to work into the system and to get things rolling. And now Zeek is starting to have his moment. And this team showed so much more depth than we've previously seen out of them.
They definitely cemented KO, I'd say. After Zeek's performance on KO and Soulcast's performance and like this evolution, I think watching Zeek on KO in particular was also...
I didn't like the Soulcast KO that much, but I did like
the Soulcast KO. I think had ups and downs, but the Zeek KO was really, really good.
It was consistently
got a ton of value from, especially as an information gathering tool and like stopping hits effectively when they were trying to just like burst onto a site. Zeek did a really excellent job a lot of the times, like either gathering the early info or preventing the hit entirely with like a well-placed knife. So I do think that this was also on top of redemption for the Acend players. It just completely unrelated to this point, but I'm just going to say it is just like KO's here. He's here. The thinking man's duelist has arrived. It's arrived.
Yeah, I did see over the course of the tournament the teams knew how to play around a KO a lot more effectively. Like you saw, it used to be that somebody picked KO, for example, on Breeze, and over the course of that map, the team would slowly get conditioned to not double drone and dog at the close areas, and they would do it further back. It got to the point where at the end of the tournament, teams would then immediately off the rip, droning and dogging from further away so the KO gets less value. But even still, like Zeek was a fucking menace to society on multiple roles. But yeah, I had high expectations for Zeek, I think, coming off of it, because he already proved that he wasn't just an online performer from Berlin, because he was the second best player, even back then when it was Cena just popping off. But yeah, very, very pleased. Gambit. I don't know if you want to finish up anything on Acend as well, or just jump back on it, Balla, as well, before we jump into this team.
Dude, their bind is so crazy.
Oh yeah,
it's actually ridiculous.
How did they keep getting through the map pool though?
I don't know.
The way into like grand finals essentially.
They got gifted, but I think that just speaks to the amount of depth that they have, right? Where teams want to play something and they have to go against their binds, which is ridiculous. They're still, I think, since Zeek has joined, undefeated on that map outside of non-seeding games. Like, I don't think people realize that, and that's like 20 some games at this point with the champions included.
I believe it's August. Since the month of August, they haven't lost on bind.
Yeah, there's 2 seeding games that they lost, but nobody gives a fuck. And yeah, that's bonkers, and includes some really, really, really top teams. So they obviously, Gambit had to ban bind against them in the grand finals. They both had the same ban, so it was like obviously somebody's going to move off of it, but still very, very interesting. But yeah, this puts an asterisk on Berlin more so than like, because before we were all like, oh, like Berlin, and that's going to be the future for them and whatnot. But this just puts an asterisk on Berlin in terms of their performance more than anything. Obviously, they won this tournament, so
yeah.
I did want to mention their game against Team Liquid, because, dude, Team Liquid before this, and I mentioned how, like, on Twitter, I was like, oh, the Cloud9 game, I already started to feel like Team Liquid wasn't all that, but Acend just shit on them.
Yes.
And this is a team, I think, at that point in the tournament, everybody still thought was the favorite, right?
Oh, yeah.
They just shit on them. It felt like there couldn't be there was no first bloods from Liquid. Acend was just winning that duel every single time, and no chance. I haven't watched it back yet again, but I cannot wait to just dissect that, because they got destroyed. Destroyed.
Yeah, I'm curious to watch back that split game, because I got my own thoughts on what happened to Liquid, and I'll touch on that as well later when we get on to that point.
Yeah.
I still want to talk about Gambit, who are in the finals between these teams. But yeah, I mean, an astounding performance from Acend to carry it all the way. The thing that moving on to Gambit as the team that was in the finals, the thing that I liked about it, the finals, obviously the fact that it was incredibly close, but this wasn't just a Gambit underperformance. Obviously, we know that they're not that kind of team. They heat up when the pressure's onto them. But this was just... There's some finals that feel like it's almost... I'm not going to say it's not earned, but they almost feel lackluster compared to like the path that got there. I think of Berlin and Gambit just rolling over Envy in certain circumstances. There were some maps that were very close, but this is a final that was like hard-earned between both of these teams. And up until the very final map, it felt like it could really have gone either way between them. And most importantly, Acend beat Gambit. If you look at the stats on that final, on the grand finals, Kurt, so many times we talk about one of the major win conditions is Nats having a good game. Look at his numbers here. Like, he's dominating. He was dominating in this series, in the finals, and they still lost.
The fact that he has plus 31, he's leading them for entries. He is doing everything for this team, and still nothing felt like it was working out for Gambit. Is just, I feel like it is showing again what we were talking about earlier, where Acend has finally found their depth, right? It is not one player that they are relying on, and now it almost feels like in some ways that's the pitfall that we're seeing Gambit in, because they have Nats, they have Chronicle on his step ups, but I don't know. It makes me question their consistency just a little bit towards this grand final. I think honestly, coming into this, they probably underrated Acend a little bit as they were looking at this game. Obviously, that gave them some respect, and they played some damn good Valorant to make it that close and to take it that far. But I think they, as well as most people, underrated Acend a little bit. And the grand final showed so much of that, especially what we were talking about earlier with like the Zeek on the KO and things like that. They've played against those agents and those ideas before. And when it came to the final, it felt like there was a lot of on-the-fly learning where Gambit was trying to adapt. And they're a team that is good at adapting, that is good at changing. I think we saw that very well in their game against Crew, in how quickly they can adjust to new circumstances. But Acend was just faster. Bone Cold just felt like he was calling better, like he was getting these fantastic reads onto Gambit, especially into like that split game where it just looked like Acend was just one step ahead for me.
What made you think that Gambit was adapting or like underestimating? Because I didn't feel that at all. I feel like they actually kind of like started off right off the bat. Like, yeah, sure, Breeze, they went down bad, and they came back. But the rest of the maps, I felt like they were prepared.
Yeah,
like they come into a sense kind of knowing that they're gonna run into a KO. Sure. They didn't run their anti-KO like comp, which was the thing that they ran the day before against Crew, right?
Yeah, I think that's true. For me, I think it was initially in way of that Breeze thing, and that's where I was showing some of that initial adaptation, the initial stuff we're talking about that's good out of Gambit. That's what they showed in that map number 1, that they have that resiliency to come back even after their initial missteps. But I suppose I'm thinking a little later into the map pool when we're talking about Icebox and when we're talking about Split, because in both those maps, Icebox especially, it was a map that started so strong. Looking back for Gambit, like they got a reasonable attacker side. They started building momentum off of that. Out of the first 6 rounds of the second half, they were winning 5 of those. And then it felt like it was Acend. And I'm not necessarily saying that, like you said, it wasn't underperformance by Gambit. They were adapting, they were changing up well. But again, it just feels like more of a situation where a lot of this was forced errors, where it felt like Acend was able to kind of find a better read through that and take it back. And that's how I feel about that Icebox game in particular. I haven't been able to watch the grand finals back completely yet, so this is just going off my own memory. But yeah.
Yeah, one of the players
I definitely think they were the better team on Fracture, though, because that's where Nats.
For
sure.
Like the majority of his huge stat padding was because of Fracture. Like his stats, honestly, if you remove Fracture from that pool, his stats are still really good. In particular on Breeze, where I felt like his essential denial, the Iron Curtain of B site every time that Acend tried to just burst B was disgusting. But you remove Fracture from that pool, and I think Nats's performance does not look. It looks really, really good, but it doesn't look otherworldly.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's just because Gambit, though, I think Gambit were an incredibly good Fracture team, which I think was part of why this team was so scary. Was that you saw a lot in this event, teams that knew how to play Fracture and had a deep map pool, minus Liquid, went really far. Well, I guess Liquid still went really far, but they got the semis.
Yeah.
But it's still, considering how deep their map pool was and how good they looked, we thought they were going to be in the grand finals. But overall, I think that was like something that was really important for this event. And what we were so shocked about Acend as well is that because we hadn't seen their split, they just floated it. And then suddenly they explode out with like this ridiculous return to monkey split comp with Omen and shit.
We knew they played that as well from before. we were theorizing they might have something else cooked up. But I just thought that the biggest difference for Acend and the reason they went on this run was the mentality shift from listening to all the interviews of the players. It wasn't necessarily they make the composition switches, but the composition switches weren't because they thought that they would excel with the comp. It was more to help them with bone cold comming and consistency in terms of their fundamentals and just their general mentality going into each map was the big takeaway for me. It's a shame we didn't get to see Gambit versus Fnatic on Fracture, because those, I mean, I think Gambit and Fnatic were the two best Fracture teams out of the event. It would have been curious to see how these comps would have matched up, I think, as well. Yeah, I wanted to touch on Chronicle as a player, actually, for Gambit over the course of this entire tournament, because overshadowed a little bit, I think, when we've been talking about the Acend win. But Chronicle, we always expect big things from him. The guy's so clutch, so unbelievably clutch, but I'm pretty sure his numbers were better than average over the course of this tournament, which is absurd. The guy is an absolute menace, which brings up this topic here. Zeek versus Chronicle for tournament MVP. We briefly talked about it on the co-stream. I'm not just locking it down to just Zeek and Chronicle between these two guys, but those are the two names that scream out to me in terms of their performance over the course of the tournament. So you can throw in other names as well and talk about it and discuss it. But yeah, for me, it's kind of a battle between these two guys when I think of the overall tournament MVP. I mean, you can see some of the numbers here, the performance. Look at Chronicle all the way up there, man. I mean, it's just crazy.
I mean, when I think about moments, I think about Chronicle saving Gambit multiple times. Like in all of their very, very tight games, it felt like Chronicle was pulling something out. But I mean, when I go to the finals too, and then I think about just Ascend's run in general, I think I agree with Zeek being MVP, just because he pounds. However, I would make the argument that on that team, like, sure, you could think of CNED, sure, you could think of whatever, because stats just tell you that way. But I would argue that in this tournament with Starkso, because he facilitated the entire role swap. And without that, I don't think that they'd be good at all. And he was very good on his role still.
Yeah, I like that take. Anybody else have any differing opinions?
I don't know. I was initially going to say Chronicle. I was going to get on the Chronicle train because of his clutch. Obviously, they didn't win the event, so normally like MVP is from the winning team. But I feel like in terms of if we're just talking about like one guy in what his performance was looking like, I don't think Gambit would have made a deep run, even if they switch him out for a similarly good player. If you insert someone else into the roster, I don't think that they get as far as they did. The variability he has in the agent pool is I think, similarly to what you were talking about with Starkso, where this guy facilitates a lot of change because he plays Sova. He plays fucking Brimstone, Killjoy's guy, and he's tried other things in the past. Like, this guy will flex anything for the team. He will perform on it. He can lurk. He can get ratty into the late rounds and find those clutches. I think that Zeek is an amazing player, but I think that Chronicle has more depth to him and has more variability in the roles that he can play and the aid he can provide to the team. I would probably call him my tournament MVP. I agree with the point about Starkso, but I don't know. Chronicle just impressed me overall this event.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is probably like one of the closest, like, there's not really a clear indicator because up until the grand finals, for me, it was Chronicle.
Yeah.
And then Acend won. And then
I think we didn't realize, though, before that, how good Acend actually was.
True. I definitely underestimated Acend coming into this. And when they played that match versus VALORANT, I was like, okay, like, I was feeling pretty right about Acend.
Yeah, well, they had a very rocky start.
They did. And then everything after that, I was like, okay, like, their run's looking pretty good. And then when they beat Liquid, I was like, oh, fuck. Like, I was like, this team is really, really good. And I think for me, it's hard to I think you could argue Starkso because of not only his clutch factor at times, because I think he got some of the most impact kills of this tournament as well. In particular, like, one of the moments that come to mind was the Icebox finals versus Gambit, and he just walls mid, walks over, and just gets two when they double swing him and just opens up a round for them. Like, there were so many moments where I feel like Starkso got kills that were huge impact kills on top of the fact that what he allowed for the roster to do in their role swaps. But it's still hard to argue against Zeek
ridiculous
because he just ridiculous. And also, right here, this is why I won't give Chronicle MVP, because he killed Crew. He killed Crew, and I won't have it, so I can't give him MVP. So Zeek gets MVP.
Yeah,
that should go down as the best play in Valorant history.
I can believe it.
Dude, it is so fucking insane.
Yeah.
The For that, dude, that looks like we're playing. Okay, maybe this is why it looks so good. But yeah, it looks like you're playing like CS from 2002 when nobody knows how to fuck to move or peek together, and you can actually have clips like this. But man, that is ridiculous.
Yeah, this is why I like this conversation topic, because it is very open-ended. Instead of just talking like tournament finals MVP, which obviously narrows it down a lot more, you get a lot of discussion out of this one, because there's things that push Chronicle up above in terms of how much he was clutching. I think he was clutching a lot more than the other candidates, but I like your shout out, Balla, with Starzo, because swapping the roles over to something which should give him less impact and still performing really well, especially when we had question marks about him. I think that was pretty dope.
I think just specifically unlocking like Bone Cold and clearly fixing any of their calling issues and stuff like that. I think that's more valuable than anything. But it's so hard to tell in the stats, because you could make the argument that some other player on Gambit or any other team is doing the same thing. We just don't know because we don't know.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call the player I'm going to shout out like overall tournament MVP, but if there was someone who was like impressing the hell out of me and was like their team MVP at the very least, I got to talk about my crew, and it's Kesnet. Kesnet was so good this event.
Any top 20 Kesnet believers at Champions here?
You refer back to the top 20 like that's justification for it when we really didn't have too much to go off of.
Dude, Connor is just so smart. It's crazy.
I am.
And you did that before my my simple scrimbuck, so I'll give you props there. I'll give you props.
that is crazy.
I don't think I agree though, because I don't look, Kesnet was fucking amazing, but if there was anybody to turn up for that team and change their fates, it was Nags.
Really? You put Nags?
You think Nags is above Kesnet for like let's say crew MVP?
Yeah. I think in this tournament I would put Nags higher up.
Really?
I don't know if I agree with you there.
Yeah,
he was very slow.
He was slow. Yeah, sure. He had the fracture game, whatever. But the reason why they beat Sentinels was because Nags had a couple of very, very key rounds. The reason why they even came close in some of the other games as well, like against Gambit and against Fnatic, was because of key rounds by Nags. Yeah. And once he got out of his head, and he never had one of those bad games again, and he was consistently pounding Durka, right? Like completely shitting on him. He was like siphoning his energy in some instances, and that was crucial. Now, overall, sure, I would say Kesnet probably had a better tournament in general. Especially like you think about Icebox and whatever, they got stomped, but he just went on a absolutely insane tear. But I think Nags was more important.
I don't know.
I just can't agree.
I don't think I can agree. I get where you're coming from, and I think that Nags had a good event and he was impressive to me. But I feel like he, in a way, by creating that space, by being that kind of fearless guy, he was the one who was setting Kesnet up, right? He was enabling Kesnet when he was finding that secondary duelist. I think especially when we're talking about. I know, but I'm getting to it. I'm getting to it. You know, sometimes you have to have some tinder to start a fire, but the fire is the thing. I don't know analogies, but
drop the fire.
Yeah, dropping bars. I'm a bit of a rapper. I'm holding my microphone again.
I'm a metaphor. I'm a metaphor enthusiast myself here. I do enjoy a good metaphor.
I'm an average Kesnet enjoyer, and I think that the roles he was playing were really important. When we're talking about some of their maps, especially in like their splits, their binds, when he is on that raise, he is just shining. He looks so good on that agent. I feel like he won some rounds, some games for them nearly single-handedly with the overarching performance. I think he's one of the biggest reasons they held on so long when they were playing against Gambit.
I mean, he did win them the split.
He was the enabler of that. And when Nags wasn't hitting, when Nags was failing at the op, which was kind of underwhelming for me, Nags opping this event. He's a great rifler, but the opping was kind of hit or miss. And for a Jett player, that's a little, but I never saw those moments out of Kesnet. Every time this guy has a rifle on his hand, the amount of space he creates on that raise, and just for information, when they play these comps that are less information heavy, I think that Kesnet oftentimes is making up for that on top of his just individual performance, which is why I probably put him edging out Nags a little bit.
Yeah. Let's shift this topic along, because the next one we're actually talking about is crew. I feel like we're already talking about it as well.
Yeah.
We've moved into this. Yeah, Crew winning our hearts in many matches to make the semis, man. Dude, some of the best moments of champs just coming off the back of the Crew games, if not the best moments in my mind. I mean, this team brought so much excitement and hype coming off the back of it as well. It was kind of like it was in meme territory at the beginning of champs, where you had the Giga Chad Crew enthusiasts who were like singing the praises of Crew, and we were all like, yeah, okay, sure, but then going all the way back, and we will talk about the upset in the groups as well with their win over Sentinels. I mean, that I have never felt more alive in that moment than then. That was I feel like I had experienced life again. I was reborn in the world as a Crew believer, because that match was insane. And yeah, it's those very high peaks that we saw from Crew that I loved about them, but it's unfortunate. I feel like that we was for so much talking about Nags as a player. I felt like he was so hot and cold in certain series where they just needed Kesnet to have these over performances.
And that's why I wasn't putting him as my MVP, because of that
if you just get 10% more out of him in certain scenarios, because sometimes he's just not putting up the numbers, it just might be enough to push Crew over the edge. But at the end of the day, the best teams in the world are the ones that can rely on the rest of the team. They don't have to just lean on a sole Jett player, a star player, to get the wins. That's what makes the best teams in the world. When I was thinking of the lead up to this tournament, like Liquid, like even Acend, for an example, when they were having a performance with Zeek and Starzo. But yeah, man, Crew, what a team. What a team. I was so close to getting a Crew tattoo.
Crew is so beautiful. May I say I predicted them out of the groups, and I predicted them to the semifinals. I'm just putting them out there.
Did you have them
predicted them out of the groups? That means you had Team Liquid losing? Is that what I'm hearing?
You had Liquid losing?
Oh,
yes.
You're a psychopath.
I had Liquid losing in the groups.
Crazy.
I had Sentinels and Crew winning.
Fucking okay. Well, that's just wild. That's absolutely wild. I will admit though, for Crew, something that we spent a lot of time talking about Kesnet, and then also Nagzet, who I think did have some very, very good performances. And even when he wasn't popping off, the one thing that Nagzet did do is that he would, I coined this term. Bren heard it a lot while we were doing the coaching. I coined the TV dinner.
Yes, the TV
dinner duelist term. I was originally applying it to Defo because I felt like he was like consistent, and then he would just like pop the fuck off once he was heated up. But really, the true TV dinner at this event, the Hungry Man meal, was definitely Nagzet, because he would go a half and go like he'd fucking
he'd just get owned
at like 2 and 12 or some shit. Obviously that's not the right numbers, but the point being is he would finish with like 2 frags and a half, and then the next half he'd end up with like he'd finish like defense with like 18 or some shit. Like he would pop off.
Dude,
so I do think that
saying this about Nags, but Kesnet had the same type of swingy shit like constantly.
Yeah, but I think overall he was
Silly.
I think overall he still had far more consistent rounds and had way less rounds where he would just do nothing or like.
I think the value that Kesnet was bringing with utility, especially when he was playing his Raze, outweighed when he was underperforming.
But he barely played the Raze. He played.
I know.
Well,
he was playing the Reyna, and I still feel like he was working well on that agent.
Also, his Raze. I mean, he played it on Bind and he played it on Split, and he pretty much was a very large reason why both those maps where they won Split.
Yep. Which
and also for Bind why they was close. But I don't even want to talk about the duelists anymore. The thing why I love Crew so much is because the real thing that set them apart from a lot of these other minor region teams that had good runs, like for example X10, I think Crew still had the best, and it was something we saw when they went to other international events before this, the other Masters events. They actually had a fundamentally good understanding and read of the game a lot of the time. The problem is that often they didn't necessarily have the fragging power to compete, because they'd have the rotates down, they'd have their util set up, they'd have like good executes. It's just they didn't really get frags. And I think this is the tournament where it finally came together. And even with some inconsistency, the players that were still very consistent for them, at like Klaus, for example, who the pillar of this squad, like who didn't clutch, but almost always got very crucial anchor kills or mid-round kills. And then the Sheriff Demon Delzik would just they would just make sure that their core understanding of the game actually finally worked, and they were getting the kills to match it. And I think that's what made Crew so exciting, is because they didn't just look like some like where I think X10 differed, where X10 was just a bunch of fucking aim freaks. Like I do think they had like very good, like they had very good plays and their bursts were great. But the reality is all those players were just built in a test tube to game, and their aim was like a next level this event, while Crew felt like a very fundamentally sound team that just didn't put it together until Champions.
Crew they were the most complete team coming from the minor regions just off the get-go, because they had, like you said, they had very clear ideas of what they wanted to do. But the thing that I like about him is a player we haven't even mentioned, Mazzino, popping off in a lot of these games as well, having so much impact. You've already mentioned the entire team, but that's to bring it back to an earlier point I said, the very best teams in the world, they don't rely on one individual to really pop off. The whole team can carry that weight and share the load. There were moments with Liquid when Scream just wasn't popping off. It was very few and far between early on throughout the tournaments, but the rest of Liquid were more than happy to just, carry the weight of it. And that is the making of a great team for me, is having a good plan, having a good macro play, and just the faith in the whole team to be able to pop off, even if your star player isn't owning. Like Nags had moments where Kesnet had to pick up a ton of the load or whatever. It's it was magical to watch them just complete. I mean, it is the biggest upset in Valorant history. That game, I mean, I like to look at a lot of the odds as well, because the companies that make the odds coming out, they have algorithms and other stuff that gets put into play when they come up with these decisions. I think it was like 5-1. The crew wins that game. No one really had expectations of them other than the real diehard LATAM fans that they would beat Sentinels. But this match, I was reborn again.
What do you think was a... Sorry, go ahead. I'll ask the question after.
Okay, I was just going to say quick, for me with crew, it is the pudding. It is the pudding. It is the proof that I was looking for, that I've been kind of whining about all year, that teams that don't have instant success just fucking nuke their rosters, especially in NA. We do that a lot. A team has one bad tournament and the roster gets nuked. Crew had a couple rough international events, was still doing well locally, and they just kept at it. It has been this 5-player roster who has been coming together and continuing to build.
They replaced one.
They did replace one.
They did. They made a small change. They made a small change, but it's not like the team ever got nuked, right? They kept a similar structure, and they kept growing through, and they kept continuing in this regard over this entire year. And even with just that one switch out, the change is miraculous, even just between this event and the last event back in Berlin.
Yeah.
I'll give you better proof, Mimi, and I think it's just Champions in general, because most of these teams made very, very, very minor changes
the entire
time.
And most of the successful teams are not the ones that completely rebuilt.
Yeah, the teams that did make drastic changes are just not at champs.
Yeah.
I mean, what was the exception? Like Cloud9? Cloud9 Blue, right?
Yeah.
That was one
but
of the
when did
teams.
C9 Blue do its rebuild? It was like... Was it far before LCQ?
They definitely are the biggest example, but like they had to, right? There's no chance before that type of thing.
But even still, it was like, wasn't it still a relatively decent gap between their rebuild and their time and their LCQ?
Because they played, they won summer champs, and then they had 2 months off. So they had like 6 months as a rebuild before this event, or like 6 months as a full rebuild after they brought in Zepp and them.
Yeah, there were a lot of teams as well that did keep like wholesale rosters throughout the entire year. I'm thinking teams like Guild, where they didn't
phase.
where they just didn't quite see the same results.
Right now.
But I think the important differentiation between them is that making important switches and then being able to identify where the ceiling is, with a roster, instead of just getting stuck at the ceiling and then thinking that you can go further beyond. It's very difficult for a lot of these teams to make those decisions, but it was dope to see crew really, really perform.
It is hard to get yourself in a position with a team of people and not necessarily have the results that you want, and break through like whatever barriers you might have. Like you actually have to be really good friends, or at least get on with each other really well to make that happen. You've seen a lot on the other end of the spectrum. Not that I don't agree with you. I think we should 100% encourage people to stick together. But I think there's examples on both sides.
I think if Guild were to have stayed together next year, Bonkar would have been the next 10s. I'm not gonna lie. I'm up here on the Bonkar stuff.
Taking him out. You're just taking him out right now. You know the thing is, NA's doing God's work, because by ensuring to continually drop players after one NSG daily tournament that is played or something, that way the Europeans can come to NA and save the region. There's
the rumors of the importing of talent. It's there. I will say I do agree with some of the criticisms of where like people have been trying to find reasons as to why NA didn't perform at champs, and a big one is like cronyism of like being too attached to your friends and bringing them in and wanting to play with people you gel with. But that is such an important part of pro play, is playing with a team where you are free to make criticism and improve together, and you know that there's not going to be any bad blood between you. Like, it's an underrated aspect of building a team that people downplay quite a bit, I think, but it is important to get along with the players you're playing with, which is why it's so common for these teams to sometimes make changes that might not make sense on paper. For example, I mean, the one that sticks out of my head is Raucous joining as a coach for Sentinels when he's had no prior experience. That raised tons of questions in my head. I was like, what the hell is going on there? But it was clear from the interviews that they did that they really liked how Raucous just immediately knew the inner dynamic of the team. And for better or worse, I mean, that's what they wanted to go with. But I understand the justification for why teams end up doing that. I didn't mean to get on a whole "why is NA failing" tangent, but we're here now. So
I can't wait to bring it back up again. But let's close the crew topic.
Yeah, let's close the crew.
I have a question.
Yeah.
They had the big win against Sentinels, and then they had the big win against Fnatic, and then they almost beat Gambit. So let's discount the Gambit game because they didn't win. Which one was a bigger upset to you guys, the game against Sentinels or the game against Fnatic, in terms of form of the team? Not necessarily in terms of like the environmental thing and whatever.
Ooh.
I think the Fnatic game was a bigger upset because Sentinels, obviously they have more titles, but Fnatic coming into this tournament looked like a much better team than Sen, to be honest. Sen felt a little stagnant to me, and we're showing some of the same issues that they have shown before. Fnatic had grown a ton, and honestly, they were a team that I saw making it a lot deeper than they did in towards this event, and crew beating them was, I think it was probably
making it deep in the tournament too. Oh no,
I'm a crazy person. I'm a crazy person.
Going into the event, you predicted Fnatic.
Well, we don't talk about my event. We don't talk about my predictions. We just talk about the things that
that's
we could dive into, I think, all of our predictions,
level predictions,
and a lot of them will be wrong.
I consumed it. I had like a G Fuel pancake a couple weeks ago.
You can never come
changed.
on when we do pick'ems. You just can't come on.
The legitimate crack cocaine bath salts predator over here. The Oracle of Tampa instead of the Oracle of Delaware.
No, I didn't actually have making it that deep in my initial pick'ems, but once we got into the event and I saw how they were performing, I thought they'd make a deep run.
Yeah, for sure.
The only fucking psycho prediction I had was crew actually making it out of groups over Liquid.
That's quite psycho.
And that was just I want to appease the South American. I mean, I love crew.
So I mean, I definitely think that Fnatic was the bigger upset of the two. Because Fnatic's form, like we talked about, was good. And also no one expected, again, even though he did pound, it's been so long since we've seen them play. And their online performance was like pretty meh. And we didn't expect Durka to come out and be demonic.
Yeah, we probably should have expected Durka to be a bit of a lanimal, but we didn't,
but I mean,
really.
It's not like, obviously we can only look at the results in front of our eyes. And it's not like we haven't even had a full year of like international competition yet, right? Like this really caps off the year. So there's not like we have like a historical president yet. They'll be like, oh yeah, Durka's going to show up every time and just own. And so Fnatic to me was the bigger upset of the two. But I don't even think that was the biggest upset because it was the X10 game versus Envy. That was the bigger upset. So
do you think that was the biggest upset?
Yeah, I think X and Envy was a way bigger upset.
We'll get on to that.
I'm with Connor on this one.
I do disagree with that, but I have reasons for it. But we're kind of shifting along here anyway to talk about Fnatic. I think the biggest upset was the crew Sentinels game, but this match obviously up there as well if you consider how good Fnatic were looking off the back of this. We were catching a lot of heat. I don't know if all I say we, like I'm literally lumping you all in with me for undervaluing Fnatic, but.
No, I mean, everyone that was on this podcast did catch. I mean, people did not like about Fnatic.
Durka's numbers were insane, but I feel like Fnatic, every time I watched them, they looked like they were playtesting multiple different comps on different maps with their officials leading up to it. But talking to the players, they were like, yeah, that was our attitude coming in. I mean, we were feeling very confident coming into the tournament. We just were using it for practice, and we weren't really taking it too seriously in the online tournaments leading up to it. And you just never know if a team is doing that, and if they actually are all smoke and genuinely were struggling and just managed to piece it together until the very end. I've been in esports too long to know that sometimes it doesn't work out like that. Sometimes a team will just come alive a week before the tournament and everything will begin to click and you just go on a hell of a run. But in Fnatic's case, there is evidence that these players are lanimals because Durka and Boaster had an amazing Reykjavik, and there was evidence there that I just didn't pay attention to.
It's not necessarily just evidence. because it's only one data point. You can't just be like, oh
Yes.
yeah, it was right
Yeah.
there before us, but we didn't actually have the fucking strings to be able to connect because there was not a second place to connect it to. So now you can go ahead and say and always know
Absolutely.
that Dirk and Bosa are going to be Planimals. But either way, not like I didn't really pay attention to the Red Bull stuff and whatever other tournaments they played because I knew that was going to be the case, and they confirmed like yeah, they were definitely fucking around.
Yeah.
But like you just watched their stage 3 and you had to have been very, very worried. And we did get they were not happy with how we were rating them, and a lot of people were doubting us. But I will say that their group performance was great, but they looked like shit in the playoffs. They looked like absolute
You think they
ass
looked
against
bad?
Crew. Yes.
Against
I think
Crew?
they looked really bad. They pissed me off so much in that playoff game. I was mauling my ass off, especially even on Haven. Like they start off Haven and like it's a close game or whatever. But bro, it felt like I was watching them play Ballista in stage 1, like after they do well in first strike type of shit. Like there were so many just basic mistakes. Poster not clearing something with a drone and his team walking in, not checking the corner afterwards. People looking the wrong way. People forgetting that the molly expires, so they can't nobody's looking behind them type of stuff. It was all those types of mistakes over and over and over. And then we get to split, and my God, did they just completely crumble? Strat calling wise, decision making wise on all the different players. Execution wise, like people were missing Viper walls.
Yeah,
like that's the excuse I got from Valorant.
I can't refute this
wall.
because I ended up watching that last map in the airport as I was waiting for my family to arrive on my phone.
Okay.
So I don't have a good grasp on this, but I definitely don't hold that strong of opinion. The early parts of that series, map 1 and 2 that I ended up watching, they definitely were making mistakes. I'm not going to say they weren't because there were moments of that, but I don't think it was a drastic underperformance.
Well, I don't know if it was an underperformance more so than just
like a crumbling is what you were saying.
I don't know if it is what they were showing before, because maybe Cloud9 and Vision Strikers were just bad, but no, I can't believe that. So yes, it must have been a crumbling in this series. They look like a completely different team.
Could have been a bit of a. I mean, they definitely didn't seem as clean. I think their icebox was still great because that's like by far their best map. It feels, especially at LAN, because it's just Durka on green, Monka W, and I think that this is. I do feel like probably if there was one map to say that like they looked rough on comparatively to their groups, it was Split. It was probably Split of them, but I do think that it was compounded by the fact that we had an actual demon performance from Peasant on the Raze in that too. So it was probably just a multitude of factors, but Split was definitely not their best map. I think Haven was still fine for them. Icebox, obviously, they're really good at. Split, they did look probably the worst in the playoffs.
Do you think that teams, what we saw the meta trending to on Split was a lot of these compositions with a ton of utility to slow down and a ton of utility that was really good on attack? I'm thinking the double controller, the Viper, the Astra, a lot of like utility to make sure that you have very good ways to kind of dissuade information gathering as well, and also hit sites and have really good defenses as well. With these teams trending towards kind of more simpler comps, less so Crew, but kind of in a way, but I'm thinking as well Acend. Do you think that teams have been overthinking it, and then the true reveal, what teams should be focusing on with Split, is just honest compositions where you don't overcomplicate it too much?
I don't necessarily think that that's the case. I am still a believer. I'm still an average Astra Viper enjoyer, especially on this map. I think it gives you a lot of flexibility, and I like it. I think that just it kind of pulling this one back to a bit more of like a macro answer is that like the game is changing to a point where teams are realizing that Astra Viper doesn't work for every single team because some people just hate playing Astra. Some teams it just doesn't gel with the way they're set up. Even if she is like in a vacuum the most optimal agent to play and the most optimal comp to play, you have to play to your team's strengths. And I think as more agents start to come out and as more changes start to come through, teams are realizing that. And there are squads who will do just fine with the simpler stuff, with the aggression off the Omen and the Raze. Like, it's really fundamental Valorant. But there are also squads, I think Fnatic is one of them, that do okay when it is still some of the more complicated stuff. Obviously, they change things, but they're also adding a new element of complexity in Doma and playing on that KO and in adding that into the mix. So I'm of the opinion that it is going to be very much like team by team. What works for you works for you. And I'm glad that we're starting to see more teams shift towards that direction.
Yeah, echoed all around. I do think also with Doma exiting this team.
Yeah, that's what I was about to bring up.
I was about to bring up the Doma exit for this squad.
Yeah.
I kind of think after this event, that was probably, you could make some arguments, I think for maybe other players, but I think Doma for this squad, probably, it's not that he needs to go find somewhere else where he can really succeed, because he just wasn't exactly what they needed for this team currently. Because I think they needed someone that was going to be a bit more explosive. And I feel like Doma has not been the explosive Doma. When this duelist duo was first formed, everyone was like, oh, this is an insane duo. And since then, event by event by event, I don't feel like they have been nearly as explosive, and they haven't had the same level of just like Doma popping off or Durka popping off. It's just only been Durka, comparatively to when you view it to like the team that win the event, Acend, where Zeek and CNED could both take over the rounds as, you know, as the second duelist, as the flex player. While Doma, I feel like he didn't perform badly by any means.
Well, so
but he wasn't
this was
really
Fnatic's
up,
choice.
Like, really crazy numbers.
This was Fnatic's choice with this move that they made. Yeah. So they've been looking. You think it's like they're looking for more firepower. The thing that I always appreciated about Doma was how he did play a lot of different roles for the team. But yeah, it's. I still think. I mean, I guess we're getting into the weeds of this particular move as well. But he's a player that I can absolutely see teams finding him a valuable pickup in terms of how much he can play and how much he is willing to play different roles, which I think is an undervalued aspect of players as well. You want somebody who's going to be able to be flexible and come to you with an agent pool that allows you to look at different ways to approach a map or whatever. But yeah.
I'd want him to move in just a pure duelist role, or just to a different role entirely versus like a flex. Like,
does that still exist though as well with the state of the game?
I mean,
seem like that kind of secondary
you can
duelist
definitely have
role.
That's it. If you can be a Jett one trick, teams will pick you up for that. But
Yeah.
I don't know if that's where I want to see Doma. I don't know if I'm with you on that, Connor. I think that he is stronger now than he used to be when he was just like a duelist one trick, and he was just like the star of Fnatic and back when he was on Summon. I think now in the more flexible role, he looks better to me. I just don't think it's the direction that Fnatic needs to take at this point in time. I think it's a good change for them to try and switch things up in the future. But I think if I am fucking creating mini esports and I want to pick this guy up, I'd rather have like a more specific, strong individual Jett and put Doma into a secondary duelist, flex, Sky, KO, whatever the meta needs kind of role, because he can do it and he has proven that he's willing to. And I'd rather have a guy like him who's willing than to like find like some random young talent and just throw them on a role that they don't know how to play.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I trust the shit out of Fnatic. If they decide to replace a player, it's probably for a specific reason.
Their coaching staff is really pretty poggers.
But I also think that that's part of the reason why I see them struggling in stuff like this. I feel like the reason why I'm so hard on them right now is because I feel like they were one of the most creative teams in group stages in playoffs, but their creativeness leads to gaps when you're actually in officials and when you're actually pressed by teams that you don't necessarily have much information on or you're not prepped for or whatever, because that is, in my mind, what happens. Like on Haven against Crew, for example, when a strat doesn't work, there's gaps left where they get completely annihilated because Kesnet he's like, oh, there's a gap here. Like,
yeah,
he just that's the type of thing that I think is a pitfall for them, and it has been for a while. And that's what Boaster talked about after Reykjavik, was he needs to try to let the team be more like Sentinels, right?
Yeah, make their own decisions as opposed to Boaster micromanaging.
Yeah, and I think that
Yeah.
sure, that probably, I think Boaster probably was successful at that. And that's a reason why they probably were very good at this event. But there's still clearly some areas where, because they're not micromanaged, they aren't doing the right things.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Well, Boaster did say that he was, in an interview, Boaster said that his approach was to try and get them to think for themselves a little bit more. And he actually went the opposite of an approach to Bone Cold, where Bone Cold focused more on his individual play. Boaster ended up in this event being a bit more hands-on with the micromanagement aspects, is what he said, because he tried to train them to, you know, obviously the adapting on the fly and thinking for yourself a lot more. But I think they reached the perfect middle ground, like you were saying, Balla, where this is the event where it's all come together.
Well, no, I don't think it is the perfect middle ground. That's what I'm saying.
Oh,
I'm saying that they still require so much micromanaging based off of what I see in their decision making, that they can't do what they need to do, which is be able to pick up gaps when things go wrong.
And I think this ties back to what Ball was bringing up about how this team was like the kings of creativity, where they're the guys who is always trying to innovate, always trying to bring a new comp and try something new out. If you have a team who is struggling in some of those fundamental situations in just the decision making, and an IGL like Boaster has to be stepping up to the role of microing and dealing with compositions that are ever changing, that are trying to pull out all these different things that players are still adapting to, I think it puts so much on Boaster's plate as an IGL that it's something that they're just honestly going to need to move past, because the best team, sure, they can have an IGL that's good at the micro. When Sentinels was like the best team in the world, that's kind of in a way how Shaz was, but you need players that are still flexible enough that they can fill out those gaps, like you were saying, Balla.
Yeah.
And I think the Doma flexibility and just the flexibility of the entire comp in general goes counter to the idea of giving more autonomy to the players while still staying very, very creative.
And it's not to say that this is a bad decision to try and create more flexibility. I like it. It's just the team needs a little more development on that, like, more fundamental level to get to a point where that can work against high level opposition.
Okay. Yeah, I'm very glad though. It seems like they're sticking with still the same core of Fnatic, and also beyond that we mentioned before, the structure, the coaching staff of this team is, I mean, it's got depth. A lot of teams right now are struggling to even find coaches in the first place. So if you find a system that works, you want to keep it, because I think that is the one thing that's going to give you longevity as a squad for sure, which has been proven multiple times. I want to talk about the other EMEA team that's on the other side of this bracket, who ended up falling short of the finals to the eventual winners, and it's Liquid, because we briefly touched on this topic. And also, I have the bladder control of an 8-year-old man, so I'm going to tee this up. And Balla, please talk about Liquid while I go to the restroom.
So, I don't know. Liquid clearly to me was the favorite. Why did you just full screen?
Because you're the leader. We're watching you now. You're the leader.
We all bow down to
We're
Balla.
watching you, Balla, right now. So lead the meeting.
This feels like I'm now in like a Skype conference call.
Yeah.
And you're about to present something.
Let's wait 5 minutes until everybody can pile in, and then I'm going to record this, by the way. So clear favorites, but we need to dissect what went wrong for Liquid, because even before group stages and whatnot, they looked really, really good. But then come playoffs, I think, is when I saw the turn. Now I'm like, hold on a second. What's going on here?
So much. I think so much comparatively to, like, so let's start where we believed Liquid were at, right? We saw them play initially, and their online play leading up to this, and it looked like their map pool was insane. It looked like they had arguably like some of the most flexible like players in their roles, with like Yampy also being IGL that also fragged. Nivera joining the team looked to be a incredibly star Sentinel player that would just get insane impact kills and also get good frags. Soulcast, and I think some were saying, and I was of that belief too, was like really getting a lot, was in good form, and the KO was hitting. It didn't hit as much at points during this tournament, but it did hit during a lot of other points. So overall, and then Scream. So like overall across their whole, and then Link continued to be arguably probably one of the best smokes player, if not an argument for like the best smokes player at points in this event.
Yeah.
So I think that was the things that all look great, and it looked like even that through the C9 match. And then we got to the Acend match, which is like really that was the pain. That was the true pain.
I don't know. I feel like I
match.
started seeing some of the early warning signs when we were watching that Cloud9 game, especially in that second map when we were looking at Ascent, there were some holes that were opened up that it really felt like Cloud9 was starting to exploit. That was the one where we were starting to see some of that kind of rougher games from Soulcast and Link. And Soulcast traditionally, he's a pretty good player when he's on the Sova, when he's on this Ascent. I feel like this is where some of the little ripples, the little micro cracks were starting to show through that eventually cause those issues then, but they still look good, right? You had Scream and Nevera like that, like brother duo, like just like carrying the shit out of this game. And I think that is kind of part of what charged them through a lot of this, because those two are just ridiculous as individuals. And then you have Yampi as well, who can pick up that IGL role and be a Jett and play more of like the selfless Jett role, less of like the tens, like I'm going to go kill everyone, more I'm just going to dash onto the site, I'm going to create the space because I have so much faith in that secondary duelist, in a player like Scream and in a player like Nevera to follow up and to get that going. I actually really like that. I'm always a fan. I've been a fan. Like when Nitro was trying the Jett experiment on 100 Thieves, I like alpha males who will play Jett as an IGL and play as a more selfless role, because I think in the future, that is where Jett should be to an extent, because her utility is just so damn good at creating space on a site and just getting traded. Like it's cool. And I love that from Yampi. But yeah, especially from the supportive line, some of the cracks were showing through for me in this game. And then it just kind of fell apart once they got to that the game up against Ascend.
I was still pretty high up on Liquid, even watching this game here, because Leaf just honestly just unlocked the inner potential and upper limitations of a human being in this match. Like the guy he unlocked something different because he was just dominating, and I felt really good for a while because I was like, yeah, my top 4 player. Everybody laughed at me, but then they ended up losing, so it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. But I truly believe it was such a drop off in terms of not the individual performance of players in that match where they got eliminated, but there was something going wrong with the macro play. I really need to look back at this split map that they ended up losing, because it felt like they were knocking their heads against a brick wall over and over and over again in certain scenarios, and it was too late when they realized, oh no, we've kind of squandered our chance to really come back here. I mean, look at that first half. It was ridiculous. And Ascend weren't even doing anything crazy. I think they had incredible control of the extremities on that split game, but the fact that it wasn't really recognized by Liquid that maybe you could start to exploit mid a bit more. Maybe you could start to, fight very heavily over one of the extremities and back it off so that, they've used all their util already. They've used their nade, their boombot, everything else to take B main. But now that you're threatening that you're retaking it, the Liquid, it felt like for whatever reason, they took a couple of steps back in this match. And I remember seeing the reactions of the players, and I think Sliggy as well on social media. And it was, in general, I think they felt like it was just a day where they had poor form. Sometimes that happens in pro play, where you underperform, you make mistakes, and that consistency of form is the thing that'll get you. They looked like one of the most consistent teams in this tournament, but this game, I was very disappointed.
Yeah, I definitely thought when I was watching both Split and Ascent comparatively, like sure, they didn't look like world beaters versus C9 game, but I also believe they were playing against C9 that was looking much better, and Leaf had turned on his monitor and activated and was simply destroying people, and while also still having like a very, very consistent supportive line with Zeta. I think arguably one of the most consistently good support players at this event. And when I watch it and compare it to their match versus Ascend, I think it was just a fundamental macro play problem where they would just, especially on Ascend, I feel like they would just on Ascend, they would just kind of like walk in to A site and die. A lot of times they would just get bogged to the choke and die, like over and over again without taking any other map control. And I watched the split too, where I felt like they would meander around a bit. They would never take ramp. and then they would just hit a side and die, like B side. And it's just like, I just felt like that's what I kept seeing over and over again, was just it's just a fundamental loss of macro play, where before, where Liquid was really, really good at showing varied looks, taking different parts of the map, drawing out utility, and then setting up, like getting picks, and then setting up the exec. It was just them just like waiting around, dying the extremities, and then hitting the site. It was just like that over and over and over again.
The thing that was so unconventional compared to their play up until this point was that they took a long time to adjust to what Acend were doing, which was not normal. Normally, I think of Liquid as a very intelligent team that make good decisions, but it just wasn't really apparent. I'm curious as well for Mimi and Balla, you guys. What's funny?
Mimi, you were just like, you're manhandling this mic.
It's so fun. I need to get one of these when I'm at home. It's a really enjoyable experience.
You probably don't hear it, Bren, because you have the compressor on your output, or the.
You hear me rattling around?
With the microphone.
Is it just being blasted?
I hope that goes out to the stream, and you just hear me fucking like.
This is a podcast, please.
I can't hear it. I'm fine hearing it.
It's fine. It's fine. Nothing bad FNS. Yeah, but what was I trying to say? I completely lost my point.
Well,
yes,
I wanted to ask. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Okay, I just want to say this quick. This game felt like an injustice to the comp that Team Liquid was running. They had a breach double duelist, and they like didn't take any space. It felt like in the mid round, they just played like this really like lackadaisical default into these late round like 5v5 hits, where it felt like the utility just was not flowing in the right direction. Scream was okay, but that was kind of it. Like I feel like the secondary duelist in Soulcast was having a rough one, and it didn't feel like the trades were coming right when they were on those executes. And again, I just didn't like the way they were playing the breach here.
Yeah, I'm curious for both Mimi and Balla. Balla, I'll start with you as well, about the future of Liquid as a team. Because we've been talking about squads sticking together and the potential of them, and maybe chopping and changing as well. What do you foresee to be the future of this squad when they were looking so strong and then they just fell short right at the finish line, is what it felt like, essentially?
Yeah, I'll lump this into like a characterization of their fall in playoffs, and also like what they need to do. They just don't have a real entry player. Like, they don't have anybody who's really taking the point. In a lot of these cases, it should be Scream, but Scream is not that great of an entry player. I don't know what it is, but there are so many opportunities here where Liquid they're never in a 5v4 situation. Like ever. And if they are, it's because of a nice piece where they are able to get in position to trade properly to make it a 4v4 or something like that. There were so many times in Bind against Acend, on Split, where somebody gets picked and they're not in that trade protocol period, and it just falls apart. And we actually, I'm gonna watch back all the Liquid's games, but I'm thinking back to the Sentinels game, and I'm like, holy shit, they're like winning a lot of 4v5s. And I'm like, that's good. But in reality, you play them against Cloud9, and you start to see, holy shit, they're winning a lot of 3v5s. Like, what the fuck is going on here? This team is mad good at mid-round calling or something like that. And then they play Acend, and they're just consistently still in these 3v5, 4v5 situations, and there's nothing they can do to dig their way out of it. They need somebody who can entry consistently and is covering specific, making it so that when they're not in protocol, when they're not following a drone or hitting with a shock dart, Viper, any of these combos, they need somebody to be able to protect them and actually play for picks.
I could see that being Nevera in the future. I think he has it. I want to see at least them practice or try in scrims some kind of agent swap, because I know I'm going to kind of double back on myself, because I said it a second ago that I'm a fan of the alpha male IGL Jett, right? I like it. I want it to work, but it didn't this event. And sometimes you kind of have to separate what you want to work and what you think on paper is not a bad idea, and what actually is effective for a team, which is kind of our conversation about comps earlier. But Like, what if we try like Nivera on a Jett? Like, just have him be like a rifle heavy Jett who is fine on the executes, being that man to dash in and play for the picks in the mid round, because he's so young still and he is so talented as an individual. I mean, I've been watching this guy since he kind of got screwed over in CS on his run with Vitality, getting kind of kicked off as that 6th player. But even back then, he was picking up more of the entry roles and he was working really well at them. And if you have someone like that who can just create the space and have Scream as the follow-up, I feel like it would look really good. And Yampi, we've seen him in the past. He's a player who can flex. He can play other roles. Maybe they try switching Yampi back to a more supportive line and then kind of pick up the roles that we were seeing out of Nivera and maybe have Nivera shift into that way. Because I think when Nivera looked his best was when he was let loose. I don't feel like the structure of the team right now is enabling him best that he can be enabled.
Yeah. I do think they were doing that with Yampi because he wasn't playing as much Jett when it was like full time. He was playing a lot more of the Astra and the Killjoy. But I like your point where you want to set up. I think one of the greatest things about this Liquid squad when you had Scream and Nivera was how well the two brothers gelled and played off of one another. Yeah. And it kind of it's a combination of both of your points that you were making as well, Balla and Mimi, where you're saying like they don't really have that entry level player, which I haven't watched their games properly back to like have that hypothesis. But what I do know is that they prioritize Scream's comfortability a lot in terms of his agent picks, and he plays Reyna a lot because if he's feeling Reyna, he'll play it, and that is going to give you less tools to play that hard entry role. And coming off the back of that, if you end up... One of the best things that I liked, as I said earlier, was Nivera and Scream playing off of each other magically. Whenever there was those rounds from Liquid, as Connor gets assaulted by a tail, there was these rounds by Liquid where it would just be Scream and Nivera, and they'd be playing off of each other, and it was incredible to see. It was like they were just linked in their minds. Their chemistry was so good in terms of just playing off one another. And maybe that swap up in roles that you're kind of like... putting forwards, that might be one of the better directions for Liquid. I quite like it.
You can't, but okay, this is a problem with Scream. You can't have somebody go into a tournament ready to play Jett, right? On Bind, for example, where he started out in group stages, have a bad game, and then be like, actually, let's play Reyna. Like, I think that's such a...
Do you think that's what happened? Do you think that because of like the half on Breeze where he went like 0 frags, where it was just like that, I think that destroyed his Jett confidence?
Stages in general destroyed his Jett confidence. Yeah,
I would, but the thing is that sucks, right? But I would rather see going forward. We're talking future only here. I would rather see Nivera learn new roles than them push Scream into something uncomfortable, because it's 100%. As much of a pain in the ass it is.
I agree with you. I think that's a great idea. I think that's a fantastic idea.
Where did I go?
Oh, good.
Bye, Mimi.
Goodbye, Mimi.
Hi, guys.
Black Square.
Black Square.
Can we drop a World War I poem for Mimi, who's gone now, in honor of Liquid?
Was that a reference to when they
dropped the World War I poem and when they lost?
I thought you were referring to like when they were covering up the windows and hiding all the lights. So
I said, can we do a World War I poem for Mimi in honor of Liquid? Because we're talking about Liquid.
We get a USB mode.
What's going on?
In the chat.
Okay. I do find it. I mean, this is just tragic.
Wait a second. Oh.
Hey!
I knew that was gonna happen. Just one of your random pictures.
Okay. We're back.
I do find it very funny that we're now asking for like a strong initiator Jett, where I feel like old Liquid, when they weren't very good, when they saw a Yampi on Jett, was just him dashing on the side and dying.
Oh yeah, but that was. I think that was more down to them not really having. Something wasn't clicking with that, and Yampi not being confident was one thing, I think, as well, because he was just kind of being left out to dry in that moment. But
I'd rather have Yampi inting in than like 3 players all baiting each other for 5 minutes of the round.
But that is the style of Liquid, where they do play quite slow in a sense, and then when they're very purposeful with the way they played the rounds. That's what I really liked about Liquid. And then they set up their players for success on defense side. The double opping that we saw, in my mind, I don't think we saw much of it actually over the course of Champs at all. Yeah, nope. They really weren't leaning into it, and I actually liked that a lot because it added an extra layer of conditioning for your opponents where they had to worry about it. But yeah, I think for Liquid, the trajectory that I saw Nivera having as well was that they were putting him in roles and setting him up to succeed. It was like, okay, here's your lineup for this, here's your protocol for this, on split, on this, that, or the other. And yeah, I think Nivera is the kind of caliber of player where I mean, this guy can play a multitude of roles, and that kind of flexibility that might come into play. I really like it, what you guys are suggesting.
I wonder though if playing at the hotel for so long screwed them. Like they came out against Cloud9, they won that match, but in my mind, again, that looked like the beginning of really, really bad for them. And then the next game was really, really bad. And they had to, well, this doesn't really matter in terms of like if once you get experienced at LAN and in general, like switching stages doesn't matter, but they played their two group stage matches at the hotel. Then they played one game at one venue, and then they switched venues again for the last. So they played in 3 different places. Could have an impact, just especially for a team that's just starting out, kind of honeymooning a little bit. That definitely could have an impact.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to quantify it, right? But it could be. I mean, really tough to tell. I just think it's very unfortunate because it wasn't. I think the liquid we saw in the playoffs was not the same liquid we were seeing earlier and online play and stuff like that. And it definitely felt like a multitude of things fell apart in terms of their map play and how they were like just approaching the map itself. And I felt like I was just watching them hit sites and die. I feel like I was like watching what happened to Crew on Breeze versus Gambit, where they just walked into B side and died many times on like a lot of maps. So
let's talk about something a little bit more positive. Unless you have a final point you wanted to
add. I think that this team still had some of the most beautiful rounds that I think that I saw in this tournament in terms of
Swill's wine. Yes.
Yeah,
beautiful. The most esoteric of rounds.
There's a lot of tannins in the depth of their round, you know. Yeah, that's all I want to add.
No, I really do hope that this general core of Team Liquid stays together as well, because I think it was. I'm hoping that we'll look back at this as like a blip that prompted change and just a further development of the squad. Because I don't think
the team needs a roster change right now. I think what they have is great. They just need more time.
No, if they made a roster change, there's no sideshow on the show. He's not going to be clamoring for it because he was before, and I was like, no, please don't. But this roster change worked out great. This was a massive success. They got top 4 at champs.
Yep.
After coming out of LCQ, like that's fantastic. So yeah, definitely. If they change anything, I'll be so mad, so mad.
On a happier note, though, as well, because we're getting quite down in the dumps when we're talking about Liquid. But the Southeast Asian teams, they brought something. And I mean, it was quality gameplay, but the joyous whimsy buff was there. We've mainly talking about X10 with this one, but you know, we got to talk about Secret as well, who is kind of in the same kind of category here as these teams that they made it out. Secret had an easier time at their group. We knew that, you know, outside of Gambit, there was a chance that they could make it all the way through, but they really impressed. And X10 as a team, oh my God, like actual people's champions. The way that they were playing was so carefree, it felt like, but
the whimsy was insane.
Yeah, you can't just put it all on the whimsy, because they had some really cool ideas that were throwing teams off, like especially against Envy. Look at that. I mean, the first time we saw them, they kind of got clowned on a little bit with the 2-0 against Envy, but then that rematch coming through, oh boy. I mean, this was a great game. I'm willing to cut Envy a little bit of slack just on the basis of the circumstances, with Victor playing from quarantine. And so, you know, presumably not the most ideal setup for Envy to be playing in this game. But holy smokes, what a performance from X10. I mean, I loved watching them play.
This is almost a 2-0 as well, because there was the round where X10 turbo-inted on Icebox on defense, and they just like walked forward and died and on belts and shit.
Yeah.
I think that was the round, and I was like, I can't believe what I've just witnessed. And if they had not, and that changed the entire course of the map, because I think they had to eco like right after, and it was just. But even so, with all that, I think that was the cool part about Southeast Asia in general, especially even Secret, who had an easier time of it. Even though they take down the mighty champions of Crazy Raccoons, a worthy opponent, is just that they all had really, really cool micro plays all the time throughout the map.
Play setup.
They would do they played so well off the breach. Both of the teams. Now Secret, I think in their final match, when they got to actually playoffs, I don't think that when they were playing versus Ascend, I think they kind of got hard read and rolled a bit, and they weren't doing nearly the same set plays and having success with that at all. But earlier versus like Viking, Team Viking in particular, and obviously Crazy Raccoon, but that's not really quite the same level of caliber. These teams were doing really, really cool set plays. And then X10 was obviously, in my opinion, I think they created the greatest upset with the Envy game because they played out of their mind. They played out of their freaking mind, and they had some of the most ridiculous plays where like the Haven triple spray from like Cruz when they were like rotating. Like it was just there's so much like crazy shit that just happened in that match where you felt just the wind, the joyous wind blowing through the arena at that time.
I heckin' love Southeast Asia.
Plat Chat.
I heckin' love them. It's such a fun region. All the players are they just seem such lovely people. But I don't know. Talking about Team Secret for me, I was impressed by Dubstep this event. Like the dude was playing against some of the best Jets in the world. Like that interview before they played Acend, that was just like so cute. That was like CNED was my inspiration to start playing Jett. And then he comes out and he has like a positive entry success rate against a team like Acend and was performing really well. Like I think for both the Southeast Asian teams in this tournament who found the big upsets in X10 and in Team Secret, like it just felt like they kind of played with nothing to lose and just sent their all into these games, didn't get in their own head whatsoever, and they found so much success. And I guess on the side of X10 as well, in terms of the players, I've talked about Dubstep, but it was Sushi Boys too on the Sentinel role, who was, where did I go? Black square.
Oh my god. The people don't want the people in charge don't want to hear the truth. They don't want you spreading it. They're shutting down Mimi.
It's not on our end. Oh, okay.
No, it's on my end.
Oh. No, I really like that point you brought up, Mimi, about talking about playing so free, which was a lot of minor region teams when they go to these international tournaments. It feels like they kind of clam up. They start to not play as confident as they have. The Brazilian teams are the biggest example of this, where they will just have moments where, you know, you play so confidently online in their online games and they don't bring it to LAN. This did not happen with the Southeast Asian teams. They came here and they made some absolute batshit plays. Like there were moments in these games where I was like, well, it's not optimal, but you got confidence to swing 3 players in a short and spray them down. I'm pretty sure that was one of the Southeast Asian
That was the Cruz moment.
teams.
Yes, that was the Cruz moment versus Envy.
Yeah, the Cruz moment. And to have the confidence that they had coming into every single one of these matches was something that was sorely missed, I think, from a lot of the minor region teams. And it showcased the big difference in just not over-respecting your opponents. Just because you are, labeled as the minor region team does not mean, you have to be playing timid. You can play the same as you were online, which is just absolutely owning, running at teams sometimes, not respecting them, having confidence in your gunplay, which we saw. It was showcased.
Also, strong supportive players. I think that's also what was important here. Is like, I don't think Team Secret or X10 had as good of the read game as Crew, but the thing that was important is that it wasn't just. Obviously, it was a highlight reel of Dubstep and Patapan a lot of the time, or Sushi Boys even when he was on the Jett for X10. But there was very, very strong supportive players out there playing with them. I was pretty impressed with Wits. The way that he set up Dubstep at times, both on Sky and on Breach. The same with for like Cruz, for X10. I think that this was also like in terms of the supportive roles and what you saw, the other supportive roles, like Dispenser. I think he was like top 6 players in terms of LAN versus online ACS difference, and like the impact he had. He had like just actually incredible frags. But it's pretty clear when you watch these teams, they still have some room to grow. And in terms of their understanding of the game, in particular Team Secret, I think X10 was definitely the better of the SEA teams, but I also think part of that was because every single one of those players was a hard fragger. Like just an absolute hard fragger on X10.
I have a bit of a hot take with X10 in that, like, I feel like, because the rumor is that Padipan is going to be going back to Overwatch and he's signed by a team. So that's the rumor
Overwatch
currently.
still exists?
It does.
Yep, it does still exist.
And sadly,
it pays better
more
than
SEA Valorant.
Exactly. That's the big point, is that if you're going to prioritize, your longevity, and if you want to be playing for the future, sometimes it's playing for a team, because the minimum salary in Overwatch right now is 55k, which is going to be way more than most teams are paying for in Southeast Asia in Valorant. But I have a hot take that I think they played better off the back of it. I have seen what happens to teams when the mentality coming into a tournament is like, one last ride, no pressure, let's send it. And I feel like we saw some of the very best out of X10 because of that, because of Padipan, being such a kind of like central force for this team in terms of not only just the role that he plays, but also he's just such a fun-loving guy. His interviews, he's popping off, he's whimsical, he's such a central part of it in terms of the positivity that this team radiates with. This round, by the way, oh my goodness.
Despite the world being so hard on men filled with joyous whimsy did prevail in many ways.
But yeah, I think that we really did see the best.
It's just a copy pasta.
Are you a whimsical boy? Are you a man with joyous whimsy? In a world that is against you.
Yeah, it's a very, very funny copy pasta that someone, because we were just talking about them being all so smiley and stuff, and then someone was just like, this world is hard on silly men filled with a joyous whimsy. Nothing in this world is harder than being a goofy and fun-loving guy.
Yeah,
and that was just X10.
I don't even think it was related to X10 when it was donated, by the way.
Was it not?
No, but I think we just ran with it because of the interviews, and they were just they were playing so free. They just didn't care. They were playing with confidence. Yeah, it's I'm really curious as a region for Southeast Asia and like APAC, how it's going to develop in the future. Like off the back of this is clear that there is a ton of talent in this region. How is it then going to get cultivated and kind of pushed forwards by Riot into the future for 2022?
Give me an APAC minor, please. Combine Southeast Asia as well as like Korea and Japan and Australia, and have it similar to EMBA, where we have a minor. A lot of other games do this, and then have the best teams from each of those like individual sub-regions go play to LAN for qualification that has a big ass prize pool to encourage orgs to actually care about Valorant.
Yeah, I think that actually is probably what is. I think everyone's been calling for that, right? After this is been give SEA just an APAC minor essentially.
Yeah. But I definitely think more tournaments. I don't know what the plans are, by the way, because I haven't looked. I know the regions are detailing the individual plans for 2022. Like EMEA put out their details, Korea's put out their details as well. I don't know what it's like for APAC. I haven't looked it up and what they're actually planning for the future, but it's clear that, maybe some more investment, more tournaments in particular as well, more opportunities for the talent to shine, I think is necessary for Southeast Asia.
I think that this tournament proved that they should be, like, if you like Valorant, you should watch SEA, right? Most of the time, people are just like, like it's SEA, who cares, whatever. But I don't know if like a minor is a good idea. I think I need to see. I'd rather see this where there's two teams at Champions from like a small region, because that's just how it works. Three teams actually. There's 3 SEA teams. Full sense we didn't talk about yet, but just because that gives them the world stage, it gives us the opportunity to watch it. It honestly forces us to watch it, especially when they make upsets like they did at this tournament. Whereas if they were locked away, then we'd get potentially the same couple of teams coming out of APAC, and everybody's like, oh, whatever, fuck this. Like, it's like 1 or 2 teams. I'd be scared of that. I wouldn't be opposed to it, but either way, like I probably wouldn't be watching an APAC minor. I did watch the LCQ though, and that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the APAC LCQ.
Kind of a similar thing. Either way, I think this.
I mean, that's basically what I was thinking with the idea of a minor, but who knows? There's smarter people.
Was the most improved region throughout the year. Like,
did they get a participation trophy? The Balla official participation trophy for?
I think, but they definitely go beyond that though, because Acend beat Envy. Like, they go beyond participation.
And does NA get a participation trophy, please?
Yes.
Can we at least have that?
Yes.
They already got it as well. All the NA teams got their little participation gold necklaces.
Yep, there you go.
There you go. That's their participation trophy.
Do we think, by the way, based off I was talking about it earlier, do we think the X10 Envy was the biggest upset, or was it the Sentinels crew? I think it was X10 Envy, but
My take is that it is the Sentinels crew game because I think Envy had much more difficult circumstances, I think, compared to the other NA teams where Victor actually was, you know, he had COVID and was playing from quarantine. That's going to affect your team a lot. I'm pretty sure every NA team played from the practice room, but it wasn't to the same extent where you had literally one of your players missing. I think, was it just Liquid and... was it just Liquid and Envy who had that situation?
Yep.
Yeah.
So
That's a hard situation to overcome as well. You can't really. That's why I don't think it is the biggest upset because the finalists of Berlin ended up getting knocked out by Acend. That's kind of crazy for sure, but I'm willing to throw Envy a little bit of slack just because of that one little variable that's there.
And I also think we were just sick of that group at that point because of all the bullshit.
Yeah,
part of that group. I think the Sentinels one was still more because not only did it mean that crew started their run and they actually made it to semifinals. Like in hindsight, I'm looking at it as well. Happened first, and it was really fucking good game the entire time. Meanwhile, Acend Envy was a good game, but not like every match was crazy, you know.
In terms of like team form, I still have some of my money on that Fnatic crew game, but in terms of like just raw, like holy shit, that's an upset.
Yeah,
I think
form, I agree with you.
I think Sen crew for sure. If we're just like they were the best team in the world. People thought they were gonna win this event, and they got owned by fucking crew gaming. So I'm here for it.
Crew gaming.
I love
Mr. Aguero's team. Yeah. Well, let's start talking about North America because we're already kind of drifting that way. But let's start with Cloud9 Blue, who we've been touching on every now and then because we've been talking about the other teams that they played against. Cloud9 were a very interesting team for me to watch this event because when it came out of the groups, I was like, oh boy, please don't let this happen. Please don't let them just squander their opportunity because the groups were so disappointing from them initially, their look, in particular because Leaf just had a really, really drastic underperformance in that, I believe it was the initial game against Fnatic, right? And even still, Cloud9 made it very close in terms of the overall series, but I was like, please, please, please don't do this to me. But they ended up picking it up off the back of that one as well, with a win over Vision Strikers, another team that looked like, you know, coming into this, I think, obviously we didn't have a good idea of what they looked like because there's nothing to even, we literally had no games to even go off of with Vision Strikers other than Berlin, but it seems that they found their footing as well. And actually, we don't even have a topic to talk about Vision Strikers because they went out, but we really should be talking about them as well. So maybe we can just combine it with this or talk about them afterwards.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we can definitely do that. I know, Bren, you have a lot of skin in the game with C9 because the people they were clowning. They were clowning on Bren for his rankings. It was the meme image of like Bren, very tiny man and like very huge figure, and that was Valorant community being mad at Bren for his C9 like player rankings of the top 20 list. And it definitely seems that at the end of it, still, I still think Leaf was a top 20 player of this event when it ended. It just
for sure
had a really terrible opening group stage performance.
It was just the opening group stage match.
It wasn't that bad. I think it was like his opening one, he was really good, and then on Fracture and the other map, it wasn't that great, but it wasn't like
it looked pretty bad considering how much the team relies on Leaf.
I guess I'm saying in groups, like the group stage in general, right?
Yeah.
I think the opening match was bad. The rest of it
that's what we're talking about mostly.
Yeah, but we're like narrowed in on the one match.
Because I mean, he bottom fragged 2 maps in a row, and like one of them he went like -13, I think, or something like that, -12. Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
It was Fracture versus Fnatic. He went -13. So it was like, obviously stats don't always tell the big picture, but when it's like a star player that's generally getting a lot for your team,
this team had the hardest fucking like run.
Yeah.
In any of these teams, like just so difficult the entire time. But I think it comes down to like that Team Liquid game, not able to capitalize on situations where Leaf puts them in fucking fantastic places, like constantly. They're in a great position, and I think it's like part of it is that they're trying to keep up with Leaf so much in that carry situation that they all of a sudden are like trapped. Like they have to go and they can't do anything else. You know?
Yeah.
That's kind of what it felt like when it came to Ascent against Team Liquid.
Yeah, that was a big disappointment for me, was them not capitalizing off the back of Leaf, just literally putting the whole team on his back in moments in this Team Liquid game, because he did set him up to succeed so much. But what I will say is that this is still a relatively young roster in the grand scheme of things. Like in terms of vanity coming into this team, there's room to grow with it, and we saw the glimpses of it. You know, you can see the potential's there. LAN experience is really good. I'm hoping for even bigger things coming into 2022 for Cloud9 Blue as well, as they get more games under their belt, more experience, and they work out exactly, you know, what some of the issues were in this, because I feel like we saw almost just the glimpse of the upper limits of their potential at NALCQ, where Xeppaa was dominating. I mean, the guy was just owning. Zeta, of course, is just so consistently good as well. But on top of that, you have Leaf putting up just mountains when it comes to his performances individually and creating these openings for them. When all of it comes together, this team's potential looks so good. We didn't see it at Champs.
They're the team where I can see their ceiling being one of the highest. Like I think that going into like year 2 of the VCT, specifically for like regional NA competition, I would not be surprised if we see a world where Cloud9 takes that top spot in our regional stuff, because this is a young roster, like you were saying, in terms of the new players that they've adopted on into the system. I'm always a fan of Vanity's calling. I think that Zeta is one of the most underrated players, especially on his Sova. His Sova is really damn good. And then you just have that duelist duo that works, and Mitch is just chilling, and he's consistent, and he's good on the lurks. Like all the pieces fit together really well, and I don't know, my hopes are high for them. I will say I don't think this was an underwhelming tournament for them. I think Crack showed. And I think that they had some clear issues against Liquid, but I do give them some passes, because I think the game against Liquid, that was when Liquid was looking some of their best out of this event, in my opinion. I think Liquid was looking really good in that game. And I think that this is kind of a wake-up call for them, where it's like, all right, we've had some issues. We can go back. We can work on this stuff, and we can own in NA. So my Cloud9 stocks are still really high coming off this event.
No, I agree with that take.
Definitely. I think that I always look at, especially when we talk about not the champs, just by default, I'm looking for like what went wrong, you know, that type of thing. But yeah, I 100% agree. I think that this was a good showing from them. They had the hardest run by far.
I mean, they beat Vision Strikers. They put up a good performance against Fnatic. They put up honestly, despite it being a 2-0, I think they put up a respectable game against Liquid.
Agreed. I just think that there was, in this game, Leaf is carrying hard, right?
Yeah.
And honestly, in some cases, they won the half, right? Then they win like 8-4 or something like that.
Yeah.
At the very least, 7-5, and there's just nobody ended up turning up with Leaf. That's a problem, but that doesn't mean they played awful by any means. It's just they couldn't figure it out, right? I think that there's some maturing to do in terms of Vanity, and the way that he confronts situations like this, because I think this is a very unique situation where one player is carrying. How do you get involved personally, individually on your level, and the rest of your team as well, without crumbling, which I think Vanity, eventually they end up doing.
Vanity has a very unique kind of attitude to it, where he essentially pours resources into his star players like Leaf. Like he will take up the judge and play the funny, wacky, crazy angle with the judge gun, and because he wants to give the better guns to the other players on his team. Yeah, I see so much potential with this Cloud9 Blue team, and I feel like where Leaf kind of like had that really bad initial game and then gradually built it back up again in the group stages, Xeppaa was carrying a lot of the weight for him at the beginning, and then they went different ways, you know? They just kind of went different ways over the course of the tournament. Xeppaa, I felt like, started to go missing a little bit more in these matches further and further into champs. But like I said, they're a young roster. I don't hold it against them. I feel like this is, if anything, it showcases that if everybody switched on at the same time, dude, this team could be really good.
Yeah. That's what we saw at LCQ, right? Yep. When they were hitting, they're hitting.
Yeah. I think the problem though is that because one player is hitting, they put themselves in a position where nobody else can hit. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
That's what it felt like in that final moment against Team Liquid. So, yeah.
Yeah,
Are
absolutely.
you trying to say that Leaf being such an integral portion of this team and getting so many kills essentially means that the rest of the team, either stylistically or just because of their form that day, or the way just their team plays around Leaf, is that
Yeah.
are you saying they're over reliant on him, or like they're just overcompensating to make sure that he looks good?
I think overcompensating, not because to make sure that he looks good, that obviously not, but to try to win because he was the only person hitting in that day is, yeah, I think that's a problem. I think they over rely on him in such a manner that he is by far and away the player that takes the most opening duels out of any player at Champions. That probably is a problem. I'm not going to say.
And the thing is, I don't think he needs to be that. I don't think he needs to be that. They have the talent. They have Zeppa. They have like the other players can step up to that role. It's just I agree with you where it doesn't feel like they're playing in a way that enables that. They're putting all their eggs into the basket of Leaf. And like we saw in that first game, when Leaf doesn't perform, the team falls apart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got high expectations for Cloud9 Blue moving forwards. I'm really excited to see them in 2022. And now let's get into the dirty laundry here of North America. Let's start talking about what went wrong, because we're going to be talking about now, starting with the next team, which is Envy. Oh boy, this team, definitely not the run we were expecting of a team that went to the finals in Berlin, was it? Going out in groups in this fashion, obviously the circumstances not ideal. What is the takeaway here for you, Connor, then? Because Envy as a team, I feel like you've got the talent there. You know that the players are good. You look at Marv as at times potentially one of the best controller players. Yay, super consistent, even on LAN, always able to perform. Something wasn't there for Envy this time around.
I think that specifically, I think earlier on in their runs, versus Acend and versus X10, something that it wasn't like the end of the world for them, but it's also because I think for Acend, was fine. Overall, they just didn't have there wasn't a lot of El Diablo level performances at this event, right? I don't think Ye overall played well. Like he had like one bad map versus X10, I think. But other than that, he was top fragging still. He was getting good kills. He was putting up like very solid numbers. It's just he didn't have an El Diablo like best player in the world performance at this event.
Right, you're reminiscing back to Berlin where we had those rounds where he would just pull out martial rounds and
he would just do like crazy things. So I think that was number one. The first problem is that when a team is at like their peak, it's like how Sentinels was in Iceland when Tins put up like the best LAN performance ever seen, type of thing. You know, it's just when you have a player that's that dominant, it can be a very big reason your form looks so good. And I think that's part of what probably the stars aligned with when Envy went to Berlin, was that Ye had an incredible performance, and he still had a very good performance here. It just wasn't like a next level best in world performance. And so it required a lot more stepping up, I think, for the rest of Envy. And when you watch them play, I think that overall they were still having issues with figuring out what they wanted to do mid-round a lot, and the only other person that was consistently putting up numbers for them was Marved. And I also felt like I just felt like they looked kind of weak at times in both their duels and some of the mid-round plays, and it felt like they kind of lost if they were lost as a team if they weren't getting just like huge kills from Ye or from Marved.
I was disappointed by two things, and I think both of them come from prep, which is, they both come from prep. The first thing is, how is a team that did not go through LCQ not implementing Fracture? Like, why is that their permaban? Like, how the hell is that your permaban? I think they're the only team that didn't go through LCQ that had that as their first ban. For the majority of the time, right? Like, it was their permaban every.
We didn't get to see them much, so.
They played 3 matches. Okay,
exactly,
that's enough for us to fucking know that was their,
no, for sure. I'm not saying that to take
time.
away, but I'm not saying they were hiding anything. But yeah, it's.
And it's not like they were playing teams that they would know would be like Fracture Demon. Like, it's clear that they did not. I don't think they prepped the map. I don't think they wanted to play it, which is
such a failure when you know it's going to be such a big part in. This is the first time we can really get serious like veto like advantages by
Yeah.
having a 7-map pool. So like, how is that, as anybody on the team, how is that not right away a thing that you're realizing that going into this tournament you're going to need, if you don't have a map, a way to get an advantage by maps, you're going to have a problem. Secondly is they went back on, what is it, two different maps. I know for sure, I'm thinking to the Icebox comp for sure, running the old stuff that they used to run instead of the stuff that worked for them at Berlin, which to me seemed a little bit more meta. That's very, very weird to me, and I didn't see newer stuff, right? So where is the prep for this team that gives them the advantage heading into this event? In my mind, it was completely missing, both on the map aspect and the comp.
Do you think there was an overconfidence from NV coming into it?
Yeah, probably. I mean, if you don't prep like that, then there has to be.
Yeah.
I mean, they're one of the teams that let Bind through for Acend.
Yeah.
Like they let, like, I don't know. I just don't know how any team kept letting Bind through.
Yeah, that was quite.
I mean, I think any team that doesn't pick up a new map is kind of trolling if they have the time, right? Like, you can get such a free advantage. I don't want to like completely reiterate Paula's point because what he said was great, but I don't know.
To play devil's advocate to it, the quality of practice teams have been complaining about quite a bit, especially if teams are still reforming and don't have much to play for. You know what I mean?
You know you're going to Germany, fly in early, scrim in EU, boot camp in EU.
Something that I was saying that they should be doing, right? I don't know how early Envy ended up flying in for the prac, but that is an excellent point to bring up. If you know that the practice isn't going to be as concrete in North America and teams are not going to be practicing seriously, you're not going to get good work done on Fracture, boot camp. Get the prep in. I don't know. I can't comment if Envy ended up doing that, but even still, you bring up excellent points, both of you, I think.
Cloud9 prep Fracture, and they were an LCQ team. They played in their opening fucking match. Like, so how could that's my, and Sentinels played Fracture too, so they clearly prepped it. They weren't picking it.
This makes me question what is Chet's role in the team. They bring in a new coach. They get rid of Mike's. I don't want to get into that whole debacle,
specifically, getting a new coach is the reason why they don't have time to prep.
This is true because you do have to integrate him into a lot of stuff, but at the same time, I mean, there was already a good rapport between the players. You have to get them into the system of the team, but those are the changes that I would have liked to see with that time. Bring in your new coach, add some more maps to your pool, like just do it. And I feel like we could have seen a better team. They just felt mega underprepared, and I think they underestimated teams, especially when it came to this X10 game. I think like early on, it didn't feel like they were giving the respect that X10 deserved, and then Acend just took every advantage. I mean, this was the game where Sushi Boys and Patty were just going mental as a duo.
Yeah, it's preparation that you guys are bringing up is definitely a key point. For me, I am leaning more now towards the direction as well of this team being so based in confidence in terms of how they play and how well they play in a series. And if they lose the mental game early, which again, I'll say, none of us ever know how a team is feeling. You can just kind of extrapolate from their play. You don't know the mental state of a team throughout a series. You don't really know what they're like. We don't know that. We're not in the comms of these teams. But it feels like when Ye cannot bail them out of some of those circumstances and some of those rounds, and they start slipping in terms of the performances, the whole team, there's a significant drop in performance when you watch these games. And there's that crumbling aspect that you see in some of the decision-making individually, in some of the macro decisions as well, how they're reading the enemy teams. X10, I imagine, is probably one of the worst opponents to go up against if you're trying to like scramble up the cliff where you're feeling like you're crumbling a little bit, because sometimes they make plays that actually don't make sense, and they're entirely based off confidence, and they will throw you off. They will throw you off, but that's exactly why you need to be able to just climb back up onto the saddle and get things going again as a team. In the past, Ye, and I think even Marv to an extent as well, have been those players where they will actually clutch out a round where it was looking like it was slipping, and they can put them back on track. That wasn't quite there as much in this tournament. I
think Marv was still doing it here. I actually think Marv at points. He actually, I mean, he kind of just won the Icebox. Like Marv really had it. I think an overall a pretty good event. I think the Gizmo popped off, but But I think that it's still like all the points we said here, but I feel like it's before I think there's been a lot of flack thrown at Chet, and we don't obviously there's not a lot of transparency yet of like what Chet of like what coaches do in teams, and also we talked about how like Rocket Sentinels was like, oh, we wanted someone that had good rapport and like
Yeah.
understood the mindset of the team, right? And that's where Chet could potentially stand for Envy, and so obviously I don't really know.
Yeah, I
We
feel
simply
like
don't know where
we
that
don't-
goes and where that goes with the prep.
Exactly. We don't know how much impact a coach has until we hear from players in interviews as to how much help they are. That's how we know that the coaching structure of Fnatic and Liquid is pretty good, because we get a lot of information from that. But in the case of Chet, just because it's a common narrative right now is where people are looking for something to blame.
Yeah,
I can see it, but I don't know if we have enough information for it as well, because you don't really know what he brings. And also, if you're going to level criticism at Envy for bringing in Chet because he knows the players and they're comfortable with him in that role, you also got to kind of level criticism at Sentinels for doing very similar things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, I mean, I think when we look back in hindsight too of the teams that Envy lost to the team that ended up winning the tournament. So, and on top of that, and this was like post. This was not Acend when they looked really shaky. I think this is when Acend when they started to pick up a bit. Was after
they had a complete
and they had a complete
180
mental shift
off their initial match. This was very good Acend.
So it was definitely like not a terrible loss in terms of the wider context of the tournament. And then X10, who, yes, it was a really big upset, but when we went through, it was like the X10 ended up like not only they beat Envy, but then they ended up playing a pretty close match versus Gambit.
There was a world where they beat Gambit, and Gambit also went on to take second place at the tournament. So the teams they lost to was respectable, but that's not enough for me. I'm still pretty disappointed with Envy off this run.
No, I agree. I feel like a lot of this was individual form, and I think Balla, you brought up earlier, like Victor having COVID and being separated from his team for so long, and like who knows how that affected them either. Like there's a lot of circumstances we don't really understand. Like
the NA teams are down like horrendous in terms of attitude there. I don't know. You guys saw the tweets probably when there was the COVID scare or whatever. Dude, they were freaking out. Like I heard from a lot of different people the things that they're saying. Like no, people don't want to be there and stuff like that. So I can't imagine
that was the interviews that the Zoms did, right? Or was it Raucous? I can't quite remember. Somebody was saying
multiple people.
So where do we pin the issues? What do we fix for Envy moving forwards as a team? Because we've pinned down that we suspect it might be as well the preparation coming in. What do you think, Balla?
I think your point about confidence and overconfidence hindering this team is definitely something, right? Like and to be fair, again, when you think about the matches they won, they played Acend and went 13-11 on Bind, right? The map that they're undefeated on, right? So they clearly prepared for that map and they played fucking fantastic. And I think that's part of the reason why is that when they choose a path to go on, they're confident in it. However, that leaves them in positions where they don't care about improving certain things because they think that they don't need it. Right. I don't know how to describe that, but that's basically it. And that's a problem. They need to find some way to improve the things that they're not good at. They need to find those holes in their play and address them. And they're consistently not doing that, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting thinking about NA. I do think as well what we were bringing up before, the attitude, Balla, when you're saying about coming into this, there is an argument to be made here, which I've been cooking up in my head, where if you get too comfortable as a competitor, high salaries, which I'm not saying is not deserved, but North America has very high salaries. You know, you are Riot's favorite region in terms of how you're treated. You're getting the gold chains around your neck. That can instill complacency at the back of your head. And there are other regions, minor region teams, that they don't have the high salaries. And for them, Champions is everything. And they are putting it all on the line. I'm not saying the teams didn't do that, because I don't think anybody consciously can even be a competitor if that is at their mind. They're just thinking, I'm just taking it easy, blah, blah, blah. But it can definitely seep in to the back of your mindset where you're thinking, maybe we don't have to prepare as much. Maybe we don't have to practice as hard, which is another narrative.
I think it happened to Sentinels.
it's another narrative that's been going around. I don't know how true it is as well, because again, I'm not privy to the practice schedules of the teams. You know, we don't know. I know people have been throwing around different shit, and Shaz was defending himself on social media. But it can definitely be a thing. It's happened in other esports as well, so there's precedent for this as well. This isn't just me blowing smoke out my ass. There's precedent for it in other esports regions.
Other esports, other sports, like
yep.
I do think that those rumors, by the way, Balla, you brought up of like players, because we had heard them obviously of like.
It's not even rumors though. There were interviews with players where they were complaining about things like the practice rooms not being air conditioned or.
Yeah, but I'm not specifically talking about the conditions of the event. I'm more so talking about the fact that like they get there and they're, because of the COVID restrictions and things, they don't want to be there anymore. They're like, oh man, they're gonna ruin my holiday, might be ruined or something. Right?
Yeah, I won't be able to go back home for Christmas.
That's understandable, I think, because from a human level, you're like, okay, no one wants to be able to miss time with their family, especially if you're a big competitor. But also, if your champs should be the only thing that matters. Like, at the end of the day, if you miss Christmas but you win champions, like as a player, that should be probably a relatively worthy exchange, right? Like
sacrifices need to be made.
Obviously, you can't tell any player like what is best for them or like how their family situation should be, but the reality is it's not a traditional job, and that includes people that are in the casting field too. Like any sort of job where it's a live event based competition job, you're going to be missing holidays sometimes. And that's especially true when you're flying internationally in the middle of COVID. Like it's just the risk you take on for going to the competition. You can't get there and then be surprise Pikachu face, COVID, I'm now quarantining, you know? Like that's just like you went to Champions. Like that's how it works. That's just how it works.
That shit was on my mind from the very beginning. I'm like,
that's literally just like you have to be prepared.
As fuck. Everybody's chilling, you know, we're all having beers in the lobby every single night type of shit. This time everybody's like, nope, not taking any risks, because this is obviously in the back of everybody's mind. And Germany was spiking like crazy. But either way, like whatever, if that was their attitude, it was their attitude. I'm not ascribing that to anybody individually except the people who probably mentioned it. But I do want to bring up another thing though, is that they got screwed in terms of prep in this event. For them, it was unbelievably difficult to figure out what the fuck was happening. They didn't have anything to do with the Acend eVOKid situation, but because of it, they don't know who they're playing.
Yep.
They all of a sudden are not playing, and then all of a sudden they're waiting for this team to play, and then they get to play the next day, which was 2 days later than they were supposed to play, I believe.
That is a great point.
And then after that, they compound this to your earlier point where you're playing against an X10 with nothing to lose or whatever, and very hard to prep for. But they're watching this Keed Stars X10 game the day before their game, and you expect Keed Stars to make it 9 times out of 10 in that, right? Like, and they crumble. So yeah, they got dealt a shitty hand in terms of prep specifically. So maybe you can cut them some slack on that regard.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to bring up. Something that we kind of brushed over as well, just thinking about it. But yeah, they did not have as much time to figure out who their opponents were because of that entire fiasco that should have been dealt with immediately. There was no reason to drag it out in the way that it was being dragged out by Riot. I think concrete decision making instantly off the straight away. I mean, you just need to know the rules of your own game. You know, the rules of your own tournament and the rulings that you need to take on that. The precedent in the past was just instant disqualification, but whatever. I don't want to talk about that too much because it was the centerpiece of our lives for the first portion of Champions.
On Tuesday.
All I wanted to do was watch Valorant, and yeah, it was annoying. But we are already kind of drifting into general North American territory, so we might as well talk about Sentinels. And they were eliminated in the biggest upset in Valorant history, in my opinion. I wrote the topics, even though you guys are saying,
you just announced it. You just said
basically,
yeah.
I'm running a show. Josh takes one flight, Wyatt takes, he's got his own prior engagements as well, and I get full control over the show now, apparently, and I'm setting the narratives. So,
good thing I agree with your narratives.
There you go. The Sentinels as a team,
guys don't agree?
They were eliminated in the biggest upset, I think, in Valorant history. Obviously, up for debate. We can get onto it later. We've got another, we can spend another 2 hours on the podcast. We've only been going for 2, so we could talk about that for 2 more.
No, we don't need to debate the upsets anymore.
We're not going to do that. But for Sentinels as a team, I feel like they in a weird sense, with the power of hindsight, we now know Crew to be just an unbelievable team in terms of, as a minor region team, they had fantastic ideas, they had pop-off moments from them, but in general, the team was so good. And this match was still incredibly close. They were moments away from making it into the overall playoffs for Sentinels. I'm wondering how to phrase this as well, thinking about Sentinels as a team for the future of them. But what are we expecting for them moving forwards into 2022 from this? Because I think they definitely choked in this game against Crew. There were opportunities for them to win. Look at that half on Split. There is no world in which teams should be able to come back when you are 8-4 up on Split attack side. That should not happen. It's inexcusable if you end up losing that. But they did lose it. They choked. What is the future for Sentinels looking like moving forward? I'll start with you, Mimi.
I mean, also, they were 8-4 up on Haven, too. They had two unbelievable giga chokes. Chokes that were, it was incredible. We need a fucking Autobot whose sole purpose is to do Heimlich maneuvers for this team in terms of those maps.
Was that
I feel like I'm watching, like, I don't know. It's just fucking choking simulated. They had this really good steak. They were really excited to eat it. And now it's just stuck in their throat. At all times, at every game, and I'm not gonna say anything. It's like a total rumor because I don't want to spread stuff that isn't necessarily true. But my worry, anyway. And I will phrase it like this: my worry is that there has become a culture of complacency within this team, and I think that this has to be their wake up call because clearly losing at Berlin was not enough. They were dominant for like the first year of this game. Go to Berlin. They have an okay run. They get upset. They lose. Whatever. It's fine, right? Surely they'll come back stronger. And they come to this and they kind of get giga shit on. They get fucking grouped. And it makes me worry about complacency. As an outsider looking in for a team that used to be so good that we know that have potential to choke out these leads to... I don't know. Like I want the Sentinels team to be a success, but I'm starting to get towards the point where I'm thinking maybe something has to change. Maybe they need a roster move to shake things up to make this team change around. And I thought that Rock is coming as a coach, despite being really unproven in that role. If it's what the players want, let the players have him. I was hoping that would help to maybe work towards these culture issues, or at least these things that could be happening within the team and try and see some different results, but it didn't. And I wonder maybe they do need a change. Maybe they do need some players to shift up, but it becomes that hard question. Who do you change?
Well, the interesting thing about this is my biggest criticism of Sentinels from Berlin was not even criticism, but I think one of the core reasons they underperformed was Dapper not having the same level of performance. And my God, did he turn it around for champs of the games that we saw. I felt like Dapper was good this event. Dapper was so fucking good. This guy, he went into champs with something to prove, and I think he proved it. Unfortunately, didn't get many more opportunities to prove it deeper into the tournament, but he was very good over the course of this. And that was one of the reasons that I thought the Sentinels fell short of expectations in Berlin. But having said that, I really don't even know where to start with this team overall, other than saying the two-head take of like, they choked. It is true. They choked. They had opportunities, winnable matches that they should have won, winnable maps that they should have won. But I really don't know what I would change with Sentinels moving forward as a team, other than I think maybe adding more concrete structure. Even if the players don't want it, I think having somebody who's in a position where they can, outside of raucous proposing ideas and taking timeouts where necessary, pivotal moments in matches, the teams that showed a lot of success over the course of champs were ones with fleshed out rosters when it comes to behind the scenes. People who are cooking up ideas, analysis, compositions, whatever you want to call it. They had the structure there behind them that was supporting the players.
I feel like for a while, Sentinels with its inner place, that they just had such good synergy and such good skill, and the adaptation was there, that it didn't matter as much what their direct protocols were because they were so good in the adaptation. But that has fallen short now these past two events, and I think this one, the bigger issue of it showing here at Champs. So I want to see a stronger coaching structure, because the way that players have described it in interviews, it does feel like Raucus is a little bit more of like someone to add some ideas, helping out with the mental coaching department, but he's not someone who's going to like change structure and like pound players into getting something done and creating like a very specific practice structure and just kind of going crazy with it. And I also feel like that's what they need. Like I really like the structure that Cloud9 has, that Fnatic has, in having
Acend
these like
as well.
coaching teams. Yeah, Acend, you're right, where they have an analyst, they have a head coach. All these people have strong ideas, because the conversation around Sentinels has always been, well, there's too much weight on Shaz's shoulders, but he can bear it. And now we've gotten to the point where it doesn't feel like he necessarily can, or at least the performance isn't showing that.
Yeah, I also think that Split haunted them in this tournament. I think the echoes of Split carrying over from Berlin still haunted them here, which was like they lost both their group stage matches, ended on Split. They lost them both. And I think TenZ did not have like by any means a blowout level performance, but this still seems like they don't have any options to pull out the Rays at any points, because they have Sick playing Sky most of these times, or even Sage. So there is also a gap in their map pool, a pretty significant gap in their map pool when it comes to Split, and it seems like they haven't figured it out yet. If they're stuck with playing TenZ on Jett, they just haven't figured out a way to play the map to make it work better, because I feel like they just can't effectively deal with a lot of the ratty shit that happens on Split.
The counter argument to that is that I think Acend played Split almost in the esque of old Sentinels, where you play your comfort roles and you focus on the fundamentals and the adaptations on the fly. There is an argument to be made that you can do that, because I think Sentinels try to move into more meta-related stuff while also putting TenZ into positions to succeed, putting them on a Jett. But yeah, I think you've got a point in terms of this map kind of haunting them a little bit, in terms of this being the back-breaking moments of Sentinels past have been on Split.
Yeah, I was specifically on Split. I was very disappointed that going into this tournament, I thought that one major thing that they needed to do was put TenZ on permajet, because I don't think that he had the flexibility to be a person to flex, specifically on Split, on other maps as well. And that would allow Shazam to play a more permanent Sova, but also he can flex a little bit too. For example, like he did on Fracture, where he played Breach. But on Split, they moved Sick from, was he playing Sage before? Yeah. He played Sage and then he went to Sky. Yeah. They went into the more meta comp, which is Astra Viper. But then they played Sky for Shazam and they kept the Sage. Whereas I would rather have had Sick go into something much more flex and different than the same old
sure
Sage wall bot and res bot, which he's good at, don't get me wrong, but I also just I don't think it's that necessary on this map. And it would allow them, for example, to play a Sick Raze, or even turn something around, right, and play a Breach at the same time, like we saw.
Shaz's Breach looked good on Fracture.
Exactly.
The roles around in that
I was disappointed that they went for the very cookie cutter basic way to change the way that they approach Split.
Mm-hmm. For me,
basically the same thing that they did before, but with a different player.
The Sentinels kind of had a middle ground in this tournament where they moved towards the more meta comps. But I think that's if the players are comfortable playing it, they will. So they're playing the Viper Astra, right? But also putting your pivotal players on roles that they are comfortable on, like TenZ on the Jett, because it's clear that he had issues kind of playing the Raze for them in that role and capacity. And also, Sick, I think he did prove himself that he was a good Sky player in this tournament. But yeah, it feels like they met a weird middle ground where they wanted to play some more meta stuff, but also put players on comfortable things and roles and agents. This boils down ultimately, Josh put out a tweet about this. I agree with it. I think the big difference maker for teams that made it far in Champs compared to the ones that didn't, which is going to encompass the NA teams we've been talking about the entire time, preparation, and what that boils down to comes down to what comps you're playing, the ideas that you have for each map, the little micro plays, the trap plays that the minor regions were doing so well that was catching a lot of these other teams off guard all the time. Little plays with the Breach, playing off contact of another player. All of those came together, and it was the extra layer needed to bring you further into Champions.
Yep.
It feels like that was slightly missing from the North American teams. It's just a fact. Like, you can be confident in your players all you want. You can put yourself in comfortable positions to succeed, but you need to have something sometimes a little bit extra. Which team was it on the bonus rounds that was pulling out really quirky ideas and strategies to win out on bonus rounds when they've got the gun differential?
I think it was
Am I thinking of Crew?
Was it X10?
Yeah,
Crew did some.
I really can't remember.
Crew pulled out magic on eco rounds a lot.
Yeah,
I just can't remember.
But I'm talking.
But I don't know if that's the protocols you're thinking.
I'm talking stuff that teams cooked up, in particular, for bonus rounds to win because they knew there was a gun differential and they had a plan coming in. That kind of level of thinking was missing from some of the big teams. Whether you call that complacency or what, I don't care. I don't know. We don't know the internal details, but that was the difference maker for me, looking at the reason why the North American teams didn't make it out of groups.
I mean, if we pull back as a whole, I think that it is a charged word, but I think that the results we saw from NA did feel a little complacent in some ways, right? That they have had so much success and then not the same level of protocols wasn't put in. And that's not to harm these teams. Obviously, they're putting in strong work. They're really trying. They want to win. They're putting in their best. But I think that in a lot of ways, like the Asia Pacific and Crew, just they wanted it more. They put so much damn time into it. And just kind of eclipsed the work that NA put in. And they had the just ridiculous individuals to add into that equation. And then you add that little bit of spice that a lot of people underestimated their regions, and they didn't have the same pressure that these NA teams had. And they didn't have the same salaries that these NA teams have. That adds a level of pressure as well. And you get this really nice recipe for upsets.
Yeah.
I do wonder what the scrim numbers were, because the Gambit coach Eng posted on their, he was like, I'm bored. I'm going to put how many times you scrimmed this year. And he said Gambit leading up to champ scrimmed like 1,160 times
in the
year. So that's around on average. I think it's like 3 blocks a day is what they were doing. So I do wonder
probably
what the
scrim 5 or 6
were.
days a week. So that's probably like 4 or 5 games
comparatively
per work day.
You know, I just wonder what and I also don't ascribe, by the way, that I think that is a fallacy in esports too, because this is a fallacy in some sense where people are like, oh, like some people realize, well, they streamed too much, they lost. And like, in a sense, I think that is true. If you don't take practice serious enough and you don't practice enough, that is going to be an issue. But pure numbers and time in the server does also not make a good team necessarily.
Yeah, it needs to be effective.
You can just be banging your head into the wall. Yeah, it has to be effective practice. You have to be learning from it.
Because you could also get to the point where you're over practicing, and that just is leading to burnout. And you come to tournaments and you're just like,
but I do wonder what the numbers are still.
It'd be interesting to see.
I would be interested to see.
Yeah. All right. I mean, go ahead,
There's
Balla.
one note about like just in general the complacency, prep, or whatever. I think a lot of people are bringing up like a culture thing right now because of NA, and I think it's definitely an overreaction. However, I do want to kind of clarify the way that people are talking about it, because I think people are just like wildly throwing shit randomly. Like, here's the culture problem. It's practice. It's this. It's that. But I think when you look at the actual issues in terms of being prep, right, and potentially confidence, this is something that NA has struggled with consistently. They always thrive on confidence, and
you're talking in terms of wider esports.
Yes, wider esports, specifically Counter-Strike for me, because I don't know any other history in terms of like FPS and stuff. But I do know history in some like in RTSs and stuff. But very, very uncomparable. Either way, they always thrive on confidence, and they always thrive on fucking amazing fundamentals, right?
Yep.
And that comes when you end up in really, really good flow with your teammates, fantastic comms, stuff like that. The best teams, the ones that have like won majors and stuff, still had those pitfalls. I'd say the only team in my recollection is Team Liquid that breaks that barrier when they go on their I am Grand Slam type of shit.
We're talking CSGO Liquid, just for context. Yeah,
CSGO Liquid. And in Valorant, I'm still seeing that same type of attitude. And at the beginning, I was like, this could just be the way that Valorant has to be played. Like, maybe you just have to play like that. But I always trend towards the idea that you're going to need a mix of fantastic fundamentals and confidence, and go to the deep end, go to FPX and Fnatic type of shit with the creativity and structure, right? And the best teams, and this happened in CSGO, will be the combination of those two. Like, that's going to be where your team's peak. Right? I'm not even going to say it's like a year from now or 2 years from now, because I think Acend is actually more leaning towards the flowy Sentinels NA way more than anything. But Gambit, for example, is, in my mind, that peak of both coming together at the same time. So that's where I think culturally, and maybe that comes from bad practice or whatever, but I think it just comes from the attitude of the players more so than anything else.
Yeah, and we can never necessarily say what causation is, but we can say what results are showing. And I think that is reasonable in saying that maybe there's a level of complacency, maybe there's not, but in some way the culture feels broken for NA. And it's happened for a while. It's happened in VALORANT, it happened in Counter-Strike. It happens in Rainbow Six Siege. I feel like every shooter game that we have NA as a major region in, this is an issue. And I think we're starting to see it in VALORANT. But that doesn't mean that it's impossible.
I could draw from experience in Overwatch, and Connor will be able to relate to this as well in the wider esports, where North America started off very strong, winning one of the first like international tournaments in Korea as well. Like with
technically that was a European team.
Technically, yes, actually that is a very good point. It was, but North America was seeing a lot more success early on in Overwatch, and then it felt like culturally they kind of fell behind in terms of things relating to that. And it wasn't until almost it was like the importing of players came around and force structure with the league, the franchise league came around, where you started to see that turn around, and the North American players actually started to flourish a little bit more. It's a complicated issue. It's a complicated problem. We don't really know the answers from it, and also extrapolating off of a lot of information that we're just kind of guessing for. But that's the fun of this podcast, you know? It makes for good conversation topics.
2 topics on NA. Actually, the one will be on NA is after this, but this is about Sentinels. I'm sorry, but I have to call out Zom's Brazil shit as a major. Like, why? That just puts so much pressure on him, man. And he does not need the pressure to perform. Like, I love the banter. I fucking honestly, I love it, but not coming from somebody who really, really needs to have, like, you can't, dude. He played not that great, and he's inciting an entire region to come after you. Like, that can't feel good, especially coming from somebody that everybody already is targeting and saying you're complacent, right? You already have that entire baggage on you. You can't do that at a tournament that is like
I think this was the most important tournament of the year for Sentinels, and it's the one where they fell the most flat.
And you just can't do that. You just can't. You need to be in a good mental space.
Really?
Yeah, I think it's bold to say that Champions is the most important tournament of the year for them. I think it was a very bold tournament.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, like, just in terms of context of them, not even that it's like this is the biggest tournament. I think if this was another Masters, it still would have been the most important one for them, because this is their chance to prove that their loss at Masters 3 at Berlin was a fluke, and they didn't. They proved they were even worse this event.
All right, let's shift this along. We've been on this topic along. Kurt, I hate to do this to you, but I do want to talk about it because I know people are going to be upset that we didn't talk about Vision Strikers as a team, but it will be a quick topic. So I do want to talk about Vision Strikers and touch on them. Vision Strikers, cool team, question mark. I want to see more of them. That's the topic title. I don't know. I do. Cool team, question mark. Here's the thing. We didn't really get to see much of Vision Strikers. That's where the question mark was, because they didn't play in anything, man. We didn't really get to see them. And they were in a very tough group with the power of hindsight, because now we know Fnatic ended up really turning up over the course of the tournament. Cloud9 ended up really turning up as well. They were in a really, really tough group, that Group D in Champs. But I don't really know where I want to go off of this topic, other than it sucked that we didn't get to see this team more, especially because they were kind of like the crown jewel of Korea, essentially, as a region, where we really had at least I had high expectations for them coming into this. And look at this. I mean, 2-1, 2-1. There are worlds in which we saw Vision Strikers make it through playoffs, and maybe they matched up better against other teams and made it a little bit further on, and we got to see them more.
Against Team Liquid.
Yeah, overall, I mean, this really just highlights, I think, in the case of Vision Strikers, God damn, I want to see more tournaments, man. Like, there needs to be more of that, which we will talk about with the 2022 VCT announcement. I just wanted to touch on it in case anybody else also wanted to say something about Vision Strikers as a team moving forwards, because this squad, this roster, they were so creative over the course of the year, and I actually really do feel like they managed to propel VALORANT forwards in directions that other regions weren't even considering as just one singular team.
Yeah,
I am going to
It's
say
actually
something
crazy
here, by
contributions
the
to
way.
tactical.
I just
Go ahead.
think, I think we're getting close. We're getting real close. In fact, I might even say that we're about to hit a Brazil moment for Korea, and that we need to start talking about how good they are, because they have yet to win anything ever. I think we're getting real close.
No, but that's bullshit. They got third at Reykjavik.
Yeah, they
I
came
mean,
close in Reykjavik.
They did. I'm just saying. I think. I'm not saying we're there yet. I'm not saying we're there yet.
Mm-hmm.
But and they had some good. They have very good maps versus good teams. Good
But
series.
here's-
Versus
I think their group was
think
just
about what Bren
Fnatic.
just said. What Bren just said is the contributions that Vision Strikers in Korea in general have made to the game strategically are already enough that we need to talk about them more than
Yes.
a region
Yeah.
that hasn't performed and hasn't had any results.
yeah.
So,
I don't want
yeah.
to structure the conversation
I
around
think
them as a failure, because I don't
in
think
that
it
moment.
was. I don't think it was. I don't think it was at all. They played two strong teams in this event, and they had really fucking close series in
Yeah,
both
but
of those games.
if you ascribe Envy as if you say Envy is a failure, then you got to say Vision Strikers a failure too, no matter whether they had a hard group or not.
I think that's fair to bring up. I think that's fair to bring up. That I think that Envy is I think that in saying Envy is a failure, I think there was a bigger chip on their shoulder to perform than for Vision Strikers. Obviously, hopes were high for this team. And I think, okay, I'm not saying they're completely all good, all dandy. They can enjoy it. They failed. They didn't win the event. They didn't make it far in the event. But I'm just putting that asterisk more than putting a raw statement. So I will
I'm not
back
saying
down
that's
a little
there
bit.
yet.
I will say, though,
there yet.
Vision Strikers did single-handedly kind of jumpstart innovation in the other regions with the
This is
help of
true.
Joshua Wilkinson and that bloody YouTube video that he made about Vision Strikers flash and dash plays and whatnot. I remember when that got put out, and the other teams, they jumped on it and they started incorporating things that Vision Strikers were doing in their own gameplay. They really did push the regions to be better. It's a shame we didn't get to see more of them. I'm not going to talk about what they need to change moving forward as well, because we didn't see many games, honestly. So it becomes difficult to pinpoint exactly what went wrong for them in general.
I don't even
But
remember their games. I have the memory.
Exactly, it happened so long ago. That's what I mean. I forgot to put it down in a runner show. Genuinely. Because it was at the beginning of the tournament, and then they were just out. They were just out.
I forgot they were.
Well,
at
you
this
remember
event.
their 10-1, or sorry, 11-1 Ascend game against Cloud9, and I think that's a good thing to remember, because that was pathetic.
Yeah, that was pathetic. You're right. It's a shame. I feel Riot are putting a lot of resources into Korea as a region. I want to see it succeed just because of the history that Korea has in esports. And I don't really know the best way moving forwards. I'm kind of moving this into the direction of, I want to see resources put into Korea as a region, yes, but competition lands, if we can, between the other regions in terms of APAC tournaments on a regular basis would be sick. It would be dope to see these teams more often, and actually, not only that, but like Vision Strikers, in the sense of you playing in the same tournament as Vision Strikers, that competition is going to elevate the whole region up as well, up to the level that they play at, which is a good thing overall. I want closer competition. But yeah, I think they made their mark on this year. Moving forwards, I really do hope that we get to see them more, and I hope that they continue this kind of, I'm not going to say dynasty, because it's essentially like dominance in Korea in their region. And I'll be honest, at the end of the year, I wasn't too impressed with the other Korean teams at all. I'll tell you that for free, watching APAC LCQ. So yeah, it's really just Vision Strikers I'm focusing on as an individual team. But yeah, I don't want to touch on this too much, because we do have a final topic. If anybody else wants some final words on Vision Strikers, no, I'm going to say it. Here it is, the next topic. By the way, just going to preface this. I didn't want to put this as the topic title, but here it is. Is Brazil the worst region? Question mark. That's it. That's the topic. That's what we're talking about, because it's been so many opportunities now for Brazil to turn
Well, guys,
up.
it was. I mean, thanks for having me on the show.
And Mimi's gone.
So many opportunities for Brazil to turn up, and it was looking so good with eEvilCat. And even with eEvilCat, which was my shining star, my hope for Brazil to come forwards, it looks like they were putting all the right pieces together. They collapsed. They fell short. They did not perform compared to where they were earlier in the groups as a team. And Again, the Riot ruling was annoying in that it wasn't concrete, it wasn't quick. Listen, you want a painless decision to be made in terms of, okay, the teams know what they have to prep for in the future. But yeah, oh, here is this the 7-0? Oh, goodbye, Mimi.
Black
He's
square.
gone again.
Yeah, the is Brazil the worst region, man? I think they've got so much talent. I'll set up the stage like this. This is a region that has a tremendous amount of talent, but it was clear that even in the moments where it looks like it was all coming together for VALORANT, and this came from the players in the interviews, what they were saying was it, I believe it was Heat, who we ended up interviewing in a loser's interview, actually, on our Plat Chat co-stream. Heat was kind of implying that the team kind of gave up around them. There was the mental block that comes off the back of it when players collapse, when the confidence isn't there. That's not good. That you don't need that when you're competing. So what I want to see from Brazil moving forward as well is that we know the talent's there. They've been given the opportunities this year. They didn't quite grasp them, but I don't know what next year is going to be holding for them, but I know that there's potential there, and I'm not willing to let it go yet. I'm still going to be hoping.
Connor, go ahead, because I know you're going to...
Well, first of all, see, I'm pissed. I'm double pissed because I did not believe in Brazil coming into this tournament.
Yeah.
And I was proven correct. But the reality was, because they showed up and actually had some decent form at points, they tricked me into losing points in them during the coach stream. So I'm still pissed at Brazil because...
You're talking about the buy round.
Yes, the buy round that we do, where I like
the fun game that has no implication
that
really.
I did not believe in Brazil coming into this tournament. I thought they were like probably not going to perform that well. They didn't, and except they had a couple moments where they looked okay. So I'm like, oh, wait a minute, like, and then like I like lost points in them in the buy round. So I was very upset. Overall, to me, I think we're just waiting for the Wyatt copium to kick in of the Brazil super team. Supposedly, I think VALORANT probably could have had a good run at this tournament, except the Riot ruling just broke their backs, and their mentals they had paper thin mentals. I think the Riot, like, I mean, it's not actually, it's probably unfair. Paper thin's probably not fair. I would say corrugated sheet metal mentals, where like it's a little bit thicker, but it could not take a severe pounding that was
like a really nice cardboard box, like the ones that like the rich people.
It wasn't like really bad mentals, but because like it was a very unfortunate event for a team for that to happen. Because I truly don't believe. Well, I mean, like, we're not going to get the whole thing. I mean, listen, but regardless,
straight up, I'll say
it's a really tough situation.
VALORANT were a better team in this matchup against Acend, and then they got owned because of their own decision making to use that band cam. Let's just say it. That was their decision to end up using. You do have a responsibility if you're playing to know what you should and shouldn't be doing, especially when there was precedent taken in other matches.
I mean, literally, got disqualified at this very event got DQ'd. Like,
there was precedent there. You need to know the onus is on them, and they did crumble. They crumbled, man. They looked like the better team against Acend. If they didn't even need to use that cam, I don't think, to win that series, that initial series. They would have had a good run of things.
The second rematch.
I think they would have had a good. Right? I think they probably would have had a good run. I was like impressed with some of the temporary maps, some of the maps that put out by Vikings and Furia and such. In particular, Furia,
for sure. Worth talking about.
No, I actually completely disagree. I don't think that. Well, okay, I don't think that this was Brazil showing that they were the worst region at all. I think this tournament was pretty good for them. Like, okay, he takes out his earbuds because he doesn't want to hear that.
It's my earbuds died. They died.
Vikings came out strong against Gambit. They choked. They choked that game. They should have won that. They should have gotten out the groups first. It's crazy, and then they fell apart. But to open out, they looked great. Saucy looked incredible. A lot of other pieces on that team looked good as well. And yeah, VALORANT looked great to start off, and then they mess up, and because of that, they even looked really good in this rematch.
Yeah,
they almost won the rematch.
They almost won.
That was going to be the coolest shit ever if they had won the rematch. Granted, that's not an opinion on whether they should have had the rematch in the first place, but it still would have been really fucking cool. And then they completely blew up. Furia almost beat Crew. Like they went pretty decently against Crew in that game. And they almost beat Sentinels as well, where we would have been like, oh, that's the biggest upset of the world when it happened. But I think that just the entire circumstances around their fans and so, like all that stuff definitely caused a lot of pressure, unneeded pressure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Made them crumble. And in terms of gameplay itself, I don't, outside of those games where they completely choked, I think they look fine, man.
I think it's more of a mental issue than a gameplay issue overall, which obviously mental is part of your gameplay, but it feels like a lot of the external pressures, these teams didn't feel like they could deal with it, right? Like it's just kind of unfortunate circumstances in a lot of these games where it was choked leads or it was them cheating and then having to deal with all the stuff on the back end of that. And I feel like it just kind of boomed them a little bit. And as Brazil, right? It is one of the regions with the most rabid fans that care about their teams, that are like, holy shit, Brazil time, let's go. And I think that does added pressure on to these squads. And it just didn't work out for them. I don't want to say they're the worst region. They performed the worst out of all the regions at the event. That's just a fact.
Whoa.
But I don't think that the talent there is...
in Japan.
I don't think that, okay, that is true. Yeah, they performed about the same. I don't think the talent there is bad whatsoever. They have some really damn good players and they have some good teams. Feed me my Brazil super team. Fix the mental, and I'm here. I'm buying.
There are rumors. I mean, the rumors are circulating. I mean, there's definitely the big roster shakeups that happen off the back of these big events, and now we're finally seeing it. I hope it comes up with some gold. I'm sure it will, because the talent is not the thing that is the issue. I agree with all of you. I think that it's the mental. And yeah, time to move on, and let's look at a big snapshot. That's champs that we've just covered. And now I want to talk about the 2021 year of VCT. And the topic that I've proposed here is, was 2021 VCT a success? And from this, I'm talking viewership, the model, the format, everything coming together, and the year as a whole for it. My initial takeaway is that, yes, I think it was a pretty good success. It's a shame we didn't see much more growth in terms of viewership off the back of Reykjavik, but I think that was a special case where it was North America performing really well in an esport, and also it was an international LAN at a time when there really were no tournaments happening on stage. So it was a special circumstances where we broke the 1 million concurrent viewer mark. But we broke it again at Champs. If that wasn't the case, if there was a drop in viewership, I would have been worried. But overall,
it did beat the Iceland viewership at the end.
Yes, it did. It slightly beat it. Yeah. So definitely, I think a success in that regard, where there was momentum gained, there was special circumstances, but yeah, you didn't see the drop off, which we might have seen, especially with North America getting eliminated early from Champs.
I think that was the overall thing that was indicative for how new this game was. Getting 1 million viewers is huge. There are some games that have been in esport for much longer that do not consistently or have not achieved that. And VALORANT was able to swing it out pretty darn quickly and achieve that milestone. Overall, despite the issues with format and things changing throughout the event, I think overall it was, as a viewer, just like pulling myself away from like any of the talent stuff I do, or as someone who's like a mega VALORANT like super fan, it's like the format's fun. You can watch any shitter team who plays in an open come up and come all the way through and make their way to champions. Like, it is very open. It feels like in a lot of ways this first year was kind of like the People's Esport. Because for me, when I think of a game like League of Legends, I don't dislike League, but it is a little bit like suit and tie, professional. These teams are in a specific league. Same with Owl, right? Where it is these set teams. There's no way to get there unless you like sell your soul in Path to Pro or in Proving Grounds or whatever. Whereas VALORANT, it feels like you have the space for these upsets. You have the space for these constant underdog stories, and there's just a lot of it to consume. And I think Riot has done a good job maintaining a lot of control as a publisher, which we know doesn't always work out, and still making it an enjoyable esport and innovating and improving. If you look at even just the broadcast side, from like early VCT this year to what Champs became, like we have very directly seen the growth. And for like the pilot year for like what they really want this esport to be, I think it was a pretty damn good success.
I think actually, Balla, how about you go first? I think you have a good insight as well as someone that's worked more directly with the broadcast side. I'll savor my thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily think that it's a broadcast topic in general. I do think that all indicators show that this was a massive success. I don't think that anybody expected, like when Reykjavik happened, that set the bar, but the bar was way fucking higher than anybody anticipated.
Oh yeah,
which I think warps our perception here at the end of the year. and even still, we were able to match that bar in terms of peak. Now, I will say that we started off with some funky formats. COVID, in some cases, is causing that, but also the whole situation at the start of Masters Berlin, where we're just like, well, what's going on here? And just in general, the start, right, of open qualifiers in EU, like completely shambolic. Completely shambolic. No streams, no like single
Actually,
win
though,
until
yeah.
the very end. Like
It sucks
and they
to watch as a fan.
it really, really sucked. And they turned that around, which turning that around was probably the biggest reason why Champions eventually became a success, because you could have imagined we still had that situation. We didn't have actual Gambit and stuff like that, and we'd have like a random NA team winning that nobody actually thinks is that good, and we'd have them against some EU team that nobody knows as well, because nobody's watching. So we could have been in a really, really bad position.
Yeah.
We aren't, and that's fantastic. I think there's definitely so much room for growth, which is also a success indicator, right?
Sure.
But like I definitely am lacking tournaments in Asia. I'm lacking tournaments in between of like LCQ and champs and stuff like that. Lacking a bunch of third-party involvement that is actually supported in a way like they actually have spec tools. Like why are tournaments running that don't have spec tools at this point? You know, those types of things are still
like the
question marks.
API, the UI.
Yeah, like only Riot events have the Barrack side, or like very directly Riot affiliated events.
Yeah.
Like if they made it more open source, I would be great. I think Riot fully has those intentions to hopefully open up more things, and I think that, I don't know, my hopes are very high for 2022 because we do have the clear path to improvement. And I think what Riot has done well, outside of just an esport, but as Valorant as a whole, is they have been very, very open with the community when they make issues. When they fucked up the format, they fixed it. And that's not to say it's like I'm giving them a pass because they made mistakes, but every tournament organizer, every company makes mistakes when they're building a massive esport from scratch. Because honestly, for how young Valorant is, it was thrown under the scrutiny of it being like a tier 1 esport, the same scale as like CSGO and League of Legends. And I'm not saying it's not. I think it 100% will be. I think this is going to be one of, if not like the biggest game out there in terms of esports. But it was under that high level of scrutiny off the rip. And to be honest, like an event like Champions, I think met those expectations and performed.
Yeah, I think you bring up a great point as well, Balla, in terms of there's room for growth for sure, because there were mistakes being made. Like an ALCQ was, in my mind, one of the biggest cock-ups I've seen in esports in a long time in terms of how that was handled. I want to see more parity in terms of like LAN tournaments, or like in terms of the scale and I guess which each region holds tournaments in, because again, it's like NA, the plan was to have a LAN NA LCQ and the other regions are more online and that kind of thing. That would be cool moving forwards. Mimi's gone again.
The crazy part about here's something specifically about COVID times in general. We just had champs pulled off in fucking Germany, which is having a spike, right? That is mind-boggling to me. And people are comparing it to CS and whatever because they have crowds.
Me too, camera.
But like NALCQ, for example, Riot specifically was trying to make sure that everybody was safe, everybody was healthy, and whatnot. We could have easily had that event, not tested anybody, and probably just been fine.
And that is happening in some esports titles.
Exactly.
Listen, I mean, I don't have to literally point particularly far, but in some esports titles, they are not taking the exact same safety precautions as Riot, and they're getting away with running events. But, well, you don't see the aftermath as well from those. So, yeah, that is a lot of respect to Riot for actually still, considering the health and safety of the staff, the players, anybody who is essentially going to be there in person and still trying to pull it off during COVID. It's very difficult. It is very difficult. Delete.
Don't delete. Don't delete.
Don't delete.
Delete it.
This is so scuffed. Oh God. Okay, we're back.
No,
we're back. I'm at a friend's house. I'm not at my house, so I'm using her setup, and that's why this is all a little scuffed.
So we could talk about the 2022 announcements that have been put forwards, but we've already been going for over 2 hours and 40 minutes. It's like a mega episode that we've covered in Champs. I propose that we leave it for next week, I think, because
I am like the camera. I am battery exhausted. I think.
Yeah, I propose that we leave it
this is
because
a good point.
I don't want to rush through that topic because there is a lot to cover with the 2022 changes. It doesn't make sense to just rush through it at the end of the episode. So I propose we'll talk about it another time and actually give it the respect it deserves because there's a lot. All the regions are doing stuff as well, slightly differently as well. So it would be good to do a deep dive. But that does leave us to our most important topic of the year. Wyatt's Weekly Award. It's not the yearly one, but it is the most important one.
Oh. Shit. I shit myself.
Yeah, those are so good.
Dude, I mean, actually...
We can't, Bren, you're the only person who can hear. We hear it through your speakers.
Did you hear it? What he said? Yeah. They always crack me up, man. Even, I mean, we recorded those like over a year ago in the Hell Content House in LA, but yeah, they always crack me up. Wyatt's Weekly Award. Wyatt, he had some prior engagements, so he's not on this episode. Same with the egg as well, in case you were wondering where Josh was. Josh is currently flying in a metal tube in the air, going to Britain land. But yeah, Wyatt's Weekly Award was actually decided well in advance of who was going to be getting this, and it's all of you members who are watching, you tier 3 Giga members who ended up subbing to us, giving us the membership, and there's a lot of you to read out, so I'm just going to go down the list. All of you are the Wyatt's Weekly Award winner. Callum, Patrick Van Valza, Cardroma, Chris R, Jordy K, Arat, NaCl, which is, I mean, that's salt, right? That's sodium.
Yes.
Eagle, Nicholas Chabot, Cameron Hicks, Josh H, Ming, The Toilet Store, David Du, Kojak, Supreme Lord Squilliam, Misha Lewis, Norel, Domi Katz, Tequili, Lunatic, Chris Lebert, Sprinkles GG, Dayman, where am I? Ready 65, Landon Summers, Ben Watkins, Design, Seismic Jeff, Seagull, hi Brandon, Kyle Basu, Chare, Darren Divecha, Midnight Premiere. How many more have we got? And that's everybody? All right, we got through it. Okay. Thank you to everybody who gave us the tier 3 subs, or the tier 3 members, I should say, for our co-stream as well. Your support.
Why?
Goodbye, Mimi. Your support has been integral and amazing, and really just part of the reason why we're able to do the co-stream. So thank you very much to everybody who ended up giving us the membership. Thank you as well to Mimi, who came on short notice as well, because it was very short notice. Battery exhausted, and a fitting way to end the episode as well. Episode 70 of Plat Chat Valorant. Thank you very much for watching, everybody, and we'll catch you next week as per usual for even more Valorant news. See you then.